The story begins with the boy being humiliatingly called a loser. He sat in thought, not understanding how such luck could have happened. To end up in another world and not receive any power or ability. He felt it was unfair. Even the other men summoned from another world bitterly admitted that their research and defense skills were completely useless. They said that he would not become even the weakest hero. When they finally reached the village, everyone was just waiting for an opportunity to chase the boy without abilities away. He answered them coldly, saying that they could have kept quiet, because he would have gotten out of there himself anyway. From that day on, Masatsugu no Yomi took possession of a shelter called Luna. But as soon as he opened the door, it came off with a crash and crashed to the ground as if mocking him. Masatsugu tried to explain to the men that the door had fallen off, but they just waved their hands, said goodbye to their future owner, and left him alone among the ruins. Naomi realized that he had no other choice. If he wanted to survive in this world, he had to adapt. The conditions in the shelter were terrible. Cold, dirt, and devastation surrounded him on all sides. He walked further and further, peering into the ruins and wondering if it was even possible to restore this place. The thought crossed his mind that perhaps someone lived here, when he suddenly heard strange sounds. Sobs could be clearly heard in the silence. The boy approached and saw a goblin holding a little girl by the hair, ominously declaring that she was good prey, and here they would set up their base. The poor girl begged to be let go. At that moment, Masatsugu entered the room and calmly asked if he was in the way. The goblin looked up in surprise, noting that there were still people left here. The monster laughed and boldly declared that the boy was late, because now both this house and the girl belonged to him. He brazenly ordered Masatsugu to get out, but the boy firmly replied that this time he would not go anywhere, because he simply had nowhere to go. The goblin laughed even louder, calling him a senseless fool. Extending its sharp claws, the monster declared that resistance was sheer madness. The next moment, it rushed headlong at Masatsugu. The boy instinctively covered his head with his hands, but suddenly a glowing barrier grew in front of him, completely stopping the goblin's deadly blow. The monster froze, shocked, and not understanding what had happened. Masatsugu also stood there in amazement. The angry goblin shouted at the boy, ordering him not to be impudent. It charged again, but this time Masatsugu could already see that it had some abilities. It deftly dodged the monster's blows, moving quickly and confidently. The girl, who was still lying on the floor, was surprised to see something incredible. Masatsugu himself did not understand what was happening to him, and was stunned by his own actions. When he finally came to, the goblin was already lying unconscious on the floor. Masatsugu looked at his hands, remembering that before he had only been credited with defense and reconnaissance skills. He was considered incapable of fighting, and he thought that was why he had ended up in such a pitiful situation. And it was then that the girl timidly asked for forgiveness. Sitting on the cold floor, she sincerely thanked Masatsugu for his help. She repeated her words again, adding that she was grateful even for the fact that he had saved a beast with such an ugly face as hers. Masatsugu looked at the girl seriously and replied that he shouldn't thank him, because the goblin was exposing himself and hindering him, so he simply beat the monster, nothing more. These words surprised the girl so much that tears welled up in her eyes again. But at the same time, she smiled through them and said quietly that despite everything, she was incredibly happy. Her eyes darted around, and she said that she was glad even though she was about to die. After these words, the girl began to lean back, completely losing strength and consciousness. Masatsugu was at a loss, but he immediately rushed to her. He caught the girl in his arms and fervently begged her to hold on with all her might so as not to disappear from this world. But suddenly the girl's body shone brightly. Masatsugu didn't understand anything at that moment, because all the wounds on her face and body began to disappear in a strange way, as if they were evaporating. She went limp again and fell into his arms. The boy looked at her in confusion, trying to call out to the girl who lay with her eyes closed, as if in oblivion. With an effort, she opened her eyes a little, then carefully tried to stand up. Touching the places that had just hurt, the girl realized that now everything seemed to be fine with her. Masatsugu was stunned to realize that he had felt a completely new and unknown power. He knew for sure that he shouldn't have the ability to heal, but something had changed. Realizing what had happened, the girl burst into convulsive sobs and began to thank Masatsugu for saving her. She confessed that she had almost come to terms with death. The guy stood up and sternly told her to stop crying, because he had already asked her not to thank him for what had happened. But this little girl was starting to annoy him more and more. He just patted her on the head and told her to be more careful. At these words, she looked up in surprise. Masatsugu apologized and explained that he had simply stroked her. The girl suddenly exclaimed that she did not mind at all, because among beastmen such a gesture was only allowed to parents and masters. Masatsugu grumbled that he had thought so it was best to stop. But she suddenly became very angry, and, grabbing his hand, politely asked him to become her master. She looked at the boy sincerely and pleadingly, begging permission to stay by his side. Masatsugu placed his hand on her head and told her not to rush, as he himself did not understand anything about the situation. The girl explained that she simply wanted to thank him for his help. It is a custom among beastmen to always follow their master and serve him to the end. Her face flushed, and she slowly began to remove her dress. She asked Masatsugu for permission to prove her devotion. Looking confusedly at the silent boy sitting in front of her, she begged him to listen and understand her intentions. With tears in her eyes, the girl admitted that she might seem like a burden to him, but she desperately wanted to prove that she could be useful to him. Masatsugu shouted sharply, ordering her to stop and put her clothes back on immediately. The girl looked confused and embarrassed, and he turned away without even looking at her. She started to get upset, but suddenly the boy explained that nothing like that could happen here, because children shouldn't do that at all. His look was extremely serious. He sternly said that this should be left for the future, for someone she would love when she was an adult. The girl happily asked if this meant that when she grew up, she would become her master's wife. These words struck Masatsugu no less than the previous ones. He exclaimed that he had not meant that at all, and added that by then she would definitely find someone else. While Masatsugu was talking serious things, the girl did not listen to him at all. She merrily walked around the room, repeating that one day she would definitely marry her master. Masatsugu silently looked at her in disbelief, wondering what he had just said, and she turned to him with a broad smile and proudly said her name, Lucy. The girl happily announced that she was ready to accept any instructions from Masatsugu. The boy only sighed heavily and agreed, after which he explained that he had come here to open a shelter. He added that since she wanted to be with him so much, she would live in this shelter, and he would only help her with food. Lucy immediately agreed and thanked him joyfully again. She ran carefree around the room, humming a song, while Masatsugu stood there in confusion, wondering if he would really have to run the orphanage. A bitter smile appeared on his face. He remembered his mother, who had gone to another man, and his tyrant father, who had left him alone since childhood. It seemed to him that the king deliberately chose people like him. As he ran his hand across the table, wiping away the dust, he thought about how children could grow up without parental love, and he himself was a vivid example of this. Deep down, he only hoped he wouldn't starve to death here. Masatsugu pulled a small, dusty apron from the closet. After shaking it off, he put it on. Inspired, he rolled up his sleeves and decided that the only way to survive in this world was through hard work. All day long, the shelter was abuzz with work. Masatsugu painstakingly hammered nails into the walls, filling up the huge holes. When he had finished one, he looked around and said with satisfaction that everything seemed to be fine now. As he worked with the hammer, he wondered what kind of skill he had developed. He noticed that from that moment on, it had not manifested itself again. Turning around, the boy was surprised to notice that behind him there was no longer any garbage, which had recently piled up in a heap. At this time, Lucy was happily running next to him, mopping the floor. She greeted Masatsugu and said that she had already taken out all the garbage, and without stopping, she ran on, cleaning up. The guy just sighed and replied that he understood her. Taking a bucket with a broom, he decided to go up to the second floor, where a completely unexpected picture awaited him. The entire second floor was sparkling clean. Masatsugu couldn't believe his eyes, wondering how this was even possible. Suddenly, Lucy called out to him and went upstairs. Smiling, she announced that she had finished everything here too. The boy looked at her work with genuine amazement. He took the bucket and thought that now he needed to get some water. But Lucy came over and said she had already done that. There was fresh water in the tank. Masatsugu froze in confusion, then replied again that he understood and went on with his business. He was getting ready to go outside, just to weed the weeds near the entrance. But Lucy came up again and said that she had already weeded everything. Masatsugu mumbled awkwardly that he understood. Meanwhile, the evening silence was slowly falling outside. As he put away the rest of his things, he couldn't help but wonder if she was an angel after all. After all, the girl turned out to be much more capable than he had imagined. He decided that he shouldn't overload her with work. He looked at Lucy, who was diligently mopping the floor nearby, and thought about it. The boy said that the best thing for children to do was always to play. If she was tired, she should go and play. But Lucy smiled and said that she wasn't tired at all, because she was happy to help him. In response, Masatsugu remarked that if she overworked herself, it would only make him worry, so she should get some rest. The girl exclaimed cheerfully that her greatest joy was to be useful to her master. She glowed with happiness at these words, and he understood that he had misunderstood her a little. He even jokingly said that he would give her even more work then. Lucy only thanked him for that, genuinely happy. Masatsugu stopped abruptly and said that it wouldn't work that way. After all, he himself had never been thanked for his work, and in normal families there was a rule that you couldn't work without being rewarded. Taking a deep breath, he thought about how to explain it, and Lucy just looked at him silently and smiled. Masatsugu quickly waved his hand and pointed his finger at her. He solemnly exclaimed that she would certainly receive her reward, for he who works deserves it. He decreed that from now on it would always be so, but Lucy only replied in a confused manner that she did not want any reward. This greatly surprised Masatsugu. The girl explained that she only wanted to serve her master. Masatsugu turned pale and asked what it meant, suspecting that he had made a mistake somewhere. But suddenly Lucy shyly admitted that there was something she still wanted. She laughed awkwardly and said that if the owner didn't mind, she would like him to pat her on the head again, just like he did then. Masatsugu asked incredulously if that was really enough, but Lucy happily shook her head and replied that for her it would be more than enough. As soon as the boy placed his hand on her head, the girl instantly relaxed, as if she had lost weight, and said how wonderful and good it felt. Masatsugu noted with doubt that Lucy was too defenseless in this state and urged her to be more careful. The girl simply replied that he had nothing to worry about. She yawned sweetly and said that she trusted only him and no one else. After that, Lucy laid her head on his legs and instantly fell asleep. Masatsugu grudgingly told her not to fall asleep on him, but the girl had no intention of getting up. She only smiled and whispered that she loved her master. The boy sighed deeply, not knowing what to do about it. It seemed to him that this could become a problem. So he became the owner of the shelter and thought that the days here promised to be truly restless. Meanwhile, a large crowd had gathered in the great hall. The king sat on the throne, and a guard girl stood next to him. They announced that those who had not yet tried their strength should come forward. People in the crowd were whispering to each other, asking who would be next, and some were about to leave. Suddenly, someone asked loudly who Naomi was. Everyone noticed Masatsugu, who was standing silently behind. They ordered him to leave quickly, expressing their displeasure at his being so intransigent and silent. The boy silently approached the magic ball that was supposed to determine his abilities. Thoughts were swirling in his head. He couldn't shake off doubts and didn't believe in the whole story. He wondered if they would be returned to their home world after defeating the Demon King. After all, it was these people who had dragged them here. With these thoughts in mind, he touched the ball. Suddenly, the book in the hands of the girl who was checking the results lit up brightly. She was confused, whispering that this simply could not be happening. One of the observers asked what had happened. The girl explained that it was the magic of summoning heroes from another world that worked. She reminded that each summoned person is necessarily given a unique skill. But what was strange was that this young man only had defense and a rudimentary level of identification skills, and nothing more. Hearing this, Masatsugu looked at everyone in disbelief. The king stood up and asked angrily how it was that such a wretch had been summoned. The girl timidly suggested that defense might have the potential of a support skill. But the king shouted angrily, ordering her not to talk nonsense. He frankly did not understand how a supporting ability could be useful. The girl disappeared and apologized. At this time, Masatsugu noticed that many of those present began to openly mock him. People laughed, calling him a complete mistake of nature. The boy thought it was only natural, because everyone else would eventually become archmages or paladins, because their abilities were of a high class, while he remained a nobody. Remembering this, he took a deep breath. The king said that he had originally planned to appoint Naomi to the army or government, but now those plans would have to be abandoned. Masatsugu thought that in reality, these were always just his own plans, and none of them would ever come true. He smiled bitterly, remembering that no one had ever fired him from his part-time job. The king asked his name and confirmed that it was Naomi Masatsugu. He declared that there was no work in his castle for such an ordinary boy, and reminded him that there was only an old shelter on the outskirts. The king decided to entrust him with this particular shelter. If Masatsugu could shelter and support at least 10 orphans, then the ruler would consider returning him to his home world. Naomi dozed off involuntarily. When he woke up, he realized that he had been asleep for some time. Lucy was still lying peacefully, her head resting on his legs. Suddenly, the boy remembered that the king had given him some money before sending him to the asylum. He began to frantically search his pockets for it. After a few minutes of searching, he pulled out a small bag of coins and wondered how best to use them for the most necessary things. While he was thinking about his purchases, Lucy woke up. She barely opened her eyes, but still greeted her master and wished him good morning. Naomi told the girl that he was going into town to buy food, and asked her to behave herself and watch the house until he returned in the evening. Lucy rubbed her sleepy eyes and asked curiously if he was really going shopping. Lucy suddenly jumped up and asked him to take her with her. Naomi was confused, but he agreed. Soon they were in a crowded market, full of hustle and bustle. The guy caught himself thinking that only now did he truly realize that he was truly in another world, completely unlike his previous life. He decided that the first thing to do was to buy some food. Meanwhile, Lucy darted from counter to counter, fascinated by the weapons and traditional clothing, of which there were so many. With a happy smile, she called the owner to follow her, but Naomi asked him to calm down a bit. Suddenly, he noticed several men looking at the girl with ambiguous smiles. The young man sighed and thought that he had taken her with him in vain. Lucy decided to look around first and promised not to draw too much attention to her master. She reached out to Naomi, a little embarrassed and with a slight blush on her cheeks, waiting for his answer. The guy immediately said he wasn't going to pretend they were on a date, but Lucy objected, saying she might just get lost in the crowd. He took a deep breath, noticing that there were indeed a lot of people. With a displeased face, he took her hand. Lucy smiled and said it was just a handshake. Later, they were already paying for their purchases when Naomi suddenly felt a strange look behind her. He looked around sharply and noted out loud that someone was following him. His gaze fell on a narrow alley where no one was. He stared intently into it until Lucy's voice distracted him. The girl cheerfully showed him the fruit she had managed to get for free, beaming with joy. Naomi sighed suspiciously and wondered if he had imagined the feeling. Lucy asked curiously what had happened. He replied that everything was fine and told them to go back. On the way, Lucy noticed a large crowd and asked what was happening there. They came closer and saw two adventurers fighting in the middle of the street, with the crowd around them excitedly cheering them on. Naomi just sighed and said that it was pointless, then called Lucy to move on, deciding not to interfere in other people's conflicts. But suddenly, a grown man approached them. He looked at Lucy carefully, called her cute, and then cheekily suggested that she go out for a bite to eat with him. Naomi flared with rage, thinking that he was trying to take the girl away, and again he regretted bringing her here. He took a deep breath, feeling the situation was becoming dangerous. But Lucy sternly replied that even other men tried to please her master, and that only proved how wonderful he was. The man shouted indignantly that she had answered incorrectly. Naomi looked at the girl in surprise and explained that he had been addressing her specifically. Lucy was confused and realized that the question was addressed to her. The man boldly declared that they did not need this guy, and asked the girl again what she thought. She hugged Naomi's shoulder in fear, showing everyone that she was choosing a master. The boy wondered if she really believed he would protect her, but the man mockingly declared that the girl should learn to defend herself. He even pretended to be offended, saying that his feelings were hurt. Then he brazenly turned to Naomi, asking if he really owned the girl. If so, then the responsibility lay with him. So why wasn't she working as a waitress at the nearby tavern? Naomi wondered with astonishment what this had to do with anything. He remained silent, which only angered the impudent man even more. The man roughly grabbed him, demanding an answer. But at that moment, Naomi's protective instinct automatically kicked in. She grabbed the man's arm and threw him to the ground. Lucy was shocked. Naomi himself did not understand what had happened, because the body was moving on its own. The man began to scream for them to let him go. The boy felt as if he were seeing all the movements in slow motion. It occurred to him that this might be the effect of his ability. The man continued to scream, trying to break free. But Naomi sternly said that she would only let him go after he apologized. The man glared at him with hatred. Then Naomi bent the man's head even harder to the ground and coldly reminded him that the guilty person should always bow. Hadn't his parents taught him that? The man couldn't take it anymore and started crying. Then Naomi pressed again and told him to forget about the apology and just stay away from them. Naomi coldly stated that people like this man were the worst example for raising orphans, and if he wanted to be released, he had to figure it out himself. The man nodded slowly, and then Naomi let him go, warning him that this time he would only forgive once. He shook the dust off his hands and told Lucy that they were leaving. The noise around them was getting louder and louder, so they decided to walk faster. The man was seething with rage, shouting that Naomi was wrong to think that everything would end so easily. As they moved away, they saw that the adventurers were still fighting. At one point, their swords clashed, and the weapons flew into the air with a clang. One of the swords flew straight at them. The blade almost landed on Lucy's head, and at that moment the man made a mean attempt to stab Naomi from behind. But even before the sword fell, Naomi rushed forward and parried the blow that was flying straight at the girl. Everyone around them froze in shock. The man flew away, and Naomi wondered in confusion what had happened. He realized that his skill had worked on its own again. The crowd began to whisper, asking if anyone had seen it. People couldn't believe that Naomi had repelled the legendary blade Aura Shulk with her bare hands. Feeling dozens of eyes on him, the boy thought it couldn't get any worse. He grabbed Lucy's hand and told her they were leaving immediately. However, as he was leaving, he glanced back into the narrow alley, for the feeling of being watched would not leave him. On the way home, Lucy smiled and told her host that it was amazing. Naomi turned sharply and asked what she meant. He emphasized that he had acted cruelly, but the girl replied that he was simply protecting her. She exclaimed happily that her master was like a real prince from a fairy tale to her. Naomi grumbled that he was not protecting her, but himself. But Lucy still laughed happily, believing that he had saved her today. She added that it felt exactly like a date, and that made her happy. Naomi just thought that she wasn't listening to him at all. He angrily exclaimed that this wasn't a date at all, because you only go on dates with the people you love, and he urged her to be patient until she met her special someone. But suddenly he felt Lucy squeeze his hand gently and smile. He wondered if she understood his words and only sighed, saying that he should hurry home and prepare dinner. Returning to the shelter, Naomi laid out all the purchases and thought that now it was time to live here, at least for a while. But suddenly he felt another look of scrutiny and turned his head towards the forest. This time he was sure that someone was watching him. He didn't know what the observer was up to, but so far it looked like he was just watching. After that, Naomi turned and closed the door tightly. The boy put a lot of cups and plates on the table, deciding that he needed to finish cooking before the evening. Suddenly Lucy came up and asked in surprise what all this was for. He asked if she meant baking soda and oil. Naomi explained that he had never found soap at the market, so he would have to make it himself. Lucy asked, confused, what sweet was. She had never heard the word. Naomi was genuinely surprised and asked if there really weren't any detergents in this world. Lucy asked if they were any special things. The guy thought he knew about the backwardness of some countries, but not that much. He explained that soap is a magical artifact that kills dirt. You can wash, do laundry, and clean with it. Lucy exclaimed, confused but happy, that her master knew absolutely everything. Naomi was sternly told not to admire him so much, but she immediately asked if she could be helped. She said that if the oil makes things clean, then she is sure that the owner will be satisfied with the result. Naomi thought it would be a good idea if the girl learned to make soap herself. He let her help, warning her not to get in the way. Lucy was delighted and agreed at once. When he lit the fire, he began to explain that first you need to boil the water, and when it boils, add the baking soda. Then you have to wait until the bubbles become smaller. Lucy was surprised to see that they were indeed getting smaller. Then the oil was gradually poured into the mixture. Lucy asked how long to stir and if she could do it herself. The boy said that the mixing could take about 30 minutes. The girl took a spoon and began to mix diligently, enthusiastically admitting that she had no idea that soap was made that way, and that it felt like she was preparing a meal. Naomi started to push her away, saying she was just getting in the way, and asked if she was hot. Lucy backed away a little and suddenly noticed that the liquid was getting thicker. The young man decided that this was enough, and explained that now the mixture needed to be poured into molds and left to cool until the water evaporated and the soap hardened. As they poured the mixture into the molds, Lucy sat at the table and watched the process closely. Naomi warned her that she would have to wait a long time. Time passed and the mixture hardened. The guy took the finished soap out of the mold and showed the result. Lucy gasped in delight. Naomi handed her a piece and told her to wash her hands immediately. The girl took the soap but was confused about how to do it. She sniffed the soap cautiously, then ran it over her dry hands and brought them to her nose again. They smelled of fresh soap. Lucy asked in surprise if she had done everything correctly. Naomi was shocked that she would have to teach her even such basic things. With a displeased expression, he took the soap away and told them to look carefully. He explained that it was only used with water. He wetted the soap in his hands, rubbed it until it lathered, and handed it back, ordering him to repeat the same thing. The girl happily agreed, although Naomi didn't understand why she had to explain such things. Lucy picked up the wet soap and immediately noticed that it had become slippery. She began to rub it carefully in her hands and asked hopefully if she was doing it right. Noticing the foam, the girl continued to wash her hands diligently. Soon her hands were covered with a fluffy lather. Lucy blew on it in amazement and exclaimed that the lather was extremely light and pleasant. But suddenly she realized that she had blown and splashed the foam. Apologizing, the girl dropped a bar of soap. The water spilled all over the floor, and Lucy's dress was soaked through. She hurriedly said that she would clean everything up immediately. but Naomi sternly asked what she was doing. He turned away and told her to just go and change, adding that she should come back to the kitchen at 3 o'clock when he was finished. Lucy agreed awkwardly, looking after him. She thought that the host was not angry at all. He was really kind, but she was worried about what would happen at that promised third hour. When she came back into the kitchen, she said she had already changed. She went over and asked if the owner was going to continue making soap. But Naomi replied that he still had some soda left, so he decided to make pancakes. The girl, surprised, asked what the soda was for. Naomi countered with the question about what she thought when she heard about baking soda. Lucy thought about it and said that once, when she was a maid, she was told that it was something for cleaning. The guy realized and noted to himself that people in this world know almost nothing about the properties of soda. He explained that by adding it to the dough, you can get an effect similar to yeast. But even on his home world, not everyone knew about it. Lucy was surprised and asked if soda was really edible. Naomi sighed wearily and asked her to leave him alone. The girl obediently agreed. The boy began to explain that first you need to separate the yolk from the white. Then he mixed the butter, yolk, and milk, gradually adding the flour and baking soda. He was surprised that the dough quickly thickened. In the second bowl, he was beating the egg whites with a little sugar. Lucy asked again if she could help. She took a spoon and began to slowly stir the batter. Surprised, she asked if they were actually making a cake base. Naomi replied that it did look similar, but it wasn't cake. He explained that you shouldn't mix too thoroughly, just lightly beat the mixture. Finally, he stopped and said that was enough. Lucy exclaimed with admiration that the master was extremely wise, and in her opinion, he was like a scientist from his world. Naomi replied irritably that she had nothing to do with scientists. Lucy looked frightened and apologized. The boy asked if she really thought he could hurt her. He added that he was trying to take care of her, reminding her of the importance of eating properly and having a snack at 3 o'clock. Hearing this, the girl was surprised. Meanwhile, Naomi was already frying pancakes. Lucy asked if they were just for him. She said she was sure the host would let her taste them too. When he looked at her, the girl immediately apologized and said that was not what she meant. Naomi sharply asked what nonsense she was talking about, since of course the 3 o'clock snack was hers too. However, he immediately added that he himself doesn't really like sweets, but in normal homes, an afternoon snack is considered a rule that everyone follows. Lucy was surprised and asked why he did so much for her, since she was only a servant and not an orphan. She said that she did not deserve such luxury and that the gods would punish her for it. Naomi grabbed her by the ears and ordered her to be quiet. He asked her what she thought about this. The girl could not stand it. She cried and begged her master to stop. The guy let her go and said he didn't know about other shelters, but this one belonged to him, so she should be grateful at least for the fact that he was feeding her. He declared that she must obey his instructions without question. When Lucy agreed, he patted her on the head, thinking it would be better that way. Then he let her go and said it was time to set the plates. Naomi placed small but fluffy pancakes on them. Lucy exclaimed that they looked delicious, but added that she couldn't eat them. Naomi replied that he wouldn't force her, and then poured syrup over the pancakes. The girl's eyes lit up. But Naomi coldly said that if she didn't eat, she would just have to throw the dish away. Then Lucy, frightened, declared that she couldn't do that, so she would have to eat. She carefully cut off a small piece with a fork, and, after tasting it, immediately beamed with happiness. Naomi wondered if she was even breathing, and the girl exclaimed in delight that it was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. The boy only asked not to exaggerate. But Lucy didn't stop there and added that the pancakes were amazing. They melted in your mouth, were tender and sweet at the same time. Naomi took a small piece himself, but they were too sweet for him. The girl exclaimed that she had a feeling that he had been a real professional chef in the past. She added cheerfully that her master not only knew everything, but also cooked wonderfully. Naomi turned away and ordered her not to talk nonsense. Then he said that there was plenty of batter left, so he could make pancakes again tomorrow for a snack. Lucy was surprised and asked if she could really taste them again. She said it was like a dream. Naomi remained skeptical. He wondered what true happiness was. After all, it was this smile that he wanted to protect. And for the first time, someone praised his culinary skills. As Naomi stood with the tablet in his hands and his thoughts far away, Lucy suddenly approached and turned to him. She asked seriously if he was okay. The guy sighed heavily and replied that no, he was just checking their budget. He explained that if they spent more than the king had allocated, they would be on the verge of bankruptcy. Lucy turned pale and asked in a trembling voice if it was because she had eaten too many pancakes. The guy stopped her abruptly, telling her not to talk nonsense. He was more concerned about making more money, and he didn't even think of begging for help. Lucy sighed and said she understood. She looked at the little plan in his hands and wondered if he really had written down all these ideas to make money. There were so many of them. Naomi replied that they were just entertainment from his world. Lucy asked if there was anything she could help with. Naomi looked at her and wondered how he could possibly refuse when she looked so sincere. He sternly said that she should choose for herself. The girl happily agreed and assured him that she would definitely be useful. He only warned Naomi not to interfere, but she didn't even intend to. There were so many ideas that Lucy didn't know which one to tackle first. Suddenly her eyes fell on one, and she asked what a comic book was. Naomi calmly explained that it was a book that was easy to understand even without reading, because the story was told through pictures. He quickly began to draw something. Turning the page, he showed that here he was fighting a dragon, and on the next page he was defeating it. That was the comic. Lucy was surprised to hear that the master's drawings were surprisingly cute. Naomi only replied that she wanted to throw them away and told her not to flatter him, as they were only sketches. That girl exclaimed passionately that this was not flattery at all, because the drawings looked original and really very cute. She said that her master had a remarkable artistic talent. Naomi was surprised, but brushed it off, saying that he was not a master at all. But Lucy insisted that it was true, because, working as a servant in a rich estate, she had seen many paintings. But this was the first time she felt such emotions from drawings. Lucy had confidently declared that such things would sell very well. Naomi looked away and thought that if that was true, then his future had become at least a little brighter. Suddenly the doorbell rang at the shelter. Lucy asked in surprise if they had any visitors. Meanwhile, those standing outside were loudly asking if anyone was home. Naomi walked to the door, where two men were already waiting. One of them introduced himself as Dren, the guildmaster of the local adventurers guild. He pointed to his bodyguard, an A-rank adventurer named Guzuzu. Naomi asked what they wanted. Dren replied without hesitation that he would speak directly, and immediately asked if the boy wanted to join their guild. Naomi objected, reminding him that he was the head of the shelter. But Dren noted that he had heard about how Naomi had broken an aura shalcum blade with her bare hands during a street fight the other day. Naomi sighed heavily, realizing that he had really attracted too much attention back then. Dren added that with such abilities, the boy would have no problem even getting an S rank. The man bowed deeply, much to Naomi's surprise. Dren explained that his guild desperately needed such people, but the boy replied that he was too busy at the shelter. Then Dren raised his head and offered to help them at least once a year, promising a reward for joining. He was ready for any conditions. At that moment, Naomi felt Lucy tug at his sleeve. He turned around angrily, asking what she wanted since he was talking. But to his surprise, the girl looked at him with frightened eyes, tears welling up in them. The boy did not understand why she was holding on to him so tightly, and why she was silent if she wanted him to refuse so badly. But understanding came quickly. He remembered his own childhood, his mother screaming that she didn't care and walking away, leaving him alone. Now he realized that Lucy was just as lonely as he had been. Naomi thought that there was no one around, and the world was always against you. It seemed to him that before she simply had no right to express her own opinions. The guy sighed and firmly said that he had no intention of giving up shelter, so he had to reject Dren's offer. Hearing this, hope flashed in Lucy's eyes. However, Guzuzu, who had been silent until then, became angry and shouted, asking how this worthless man dared to refuse Mr. Dren. He shouted that Naomi was just a slug who ran a miserable asylum. Dren tried to stop him, but he wasn't listening anymore. Guzuzu drew his weapon and declared that the story with the blade was just a rumor. Therefore, Naomi had no right to pretend to be someone stronger. His sword was already glowing with magical power. He was about to kill Naomi, swinging with all his strength, calling the boy too cocky. At that moment, the young man felt a strange impulse at his fingertips. Even before the sword fell, Naomi parried a powerful blow with her bare hands, after which the blade entered the ground with a thud. Guzuzu froze in confusion, not understanding what had happened. He looked around, wondering where his sword had gone, while Naomi stood completely still. The boy picked up the sword from the ground with one hand, gripped it tightly, and said coldly that the weapon was ridiculously worthless. Guzuzu couldn't understand how that was possible. Naomi gripped the blade even tighter, and cracks appeared on it. With a stern look, he said that this sword was as worthless as Guzuzu's own techniques, and the next moment the blade shattered into pieces. Guzuzu just gasped in shock, while Naomi turned away and ordered them both to behave themselves. He was about to say goodbye when Dren suddenly stopped him, falling to his knees and starting to apologize for his subordinate's stupidity. Naomi calmly replied that that was exactly what it was. It was just stupidity. But he added that it was unbecoming for a guildmaster to bow to a child. At this moment, the enraged Guzuzu was about to shout something again and attack, but Dren hit him with all his might and ordered him to be quiet. Dren admitted that he couldn't help but pay tribute to Naomi's strength, and in such a situation he simply had to apologize. The guy just sighed and said that he accepted the apology, but it would be problematic if anyone saw them, so he asked Dren to get up quickly. But the man grabbed his hands and insisted that it was his own fault. He returned to the subject of the guild and added that Naomi could work with them at least in her free time. The young man thought that this was even harder than simply refusing. He tried to pull his hands away and sharply asked why Dren needed such strength. Dren sighed heavily and said he would be honest. He admitted that the kingdom of Balk and the neighboring state were preparing for war. A year ago they had suddenly invaded the elven forest and burned it to the ground. And that was not all, because with each passing day, their battles with the demons became more and more fierce. Naomi realized that Dren was simply using the instability of the neighboring kingdom as a powerful argument to persuade it to cooperate. Naomi even smiled, surprised at how much fuss had been made about it. He thought that if the situation was really like this, then we should be prepared for the worst. The guy said that he would think about everything, but for him, the shelter would always come first. The man thanked Naomi and handed him a small bag, asking him to accept it as a donation for the orphanage or compensation for his subordinate's behavior. But Naomi refused, saying there was no need. As they were leaving, Dren hit Guzuzu again and ordered him to get up, because they were leaving. The boy asked aloud if they intended to use it for their own selfish purposes. Lucy, surprised, asked if there was really that much money in this little bag. They opened it, and the girl exclaimed with delight at the large sum of money they had received. Naomi only laughed bitterly, saying that it was, after all, a simple bribe. Suddenly, a little girl approached them and declared that she had seen exactly what Naomi had done. She took off her hood and said that his hands were truly valuable, then smiled proudly and added that he was probably perfect for her purposes. The girl grinned and said that Naomi was really capable. As it turned out, an elf had been watching them from the shadows all this time. Lucy asked in surprise who it was. Naomi assumed that she was the one who had been following him around town, and asked if that was true. The girl smiled slyly, admitting that he had guessed. She said her name was Erin, and she was the former queen of the Elven Forest. Naomi coldly replied that she needed a better story for anyone to believe it. He had heard that the Elven Forest was destroyed by the kingdom of Balk. Erin just nodded, saying that she knew that herself. She clenched her fist and shouted passionately that it was true. A year ago, her country had been razed to the ground. She swore to avenge her mother and father with her own hands. Naomi replied indifferently that she could do whatever she wanted. He assumed she was looking for mercenaries, but there were none here, so she had come to the wrong place. But Erin proudly exclaimed that she was never wrong. She clarified that this was an orphanage, and since her parents had been killed, this was where she belonged. She confidently told Masatsugu that he was strong, and she knew it. He was surprised that she knew his name. She added that it was wiser for her to stay by his side than to deal with mercenaries. At that moment, Naomi realized that he had drawn too much attention to the fight in the city. He sharply stated that he was against the idea, because as the manager, he decided who could live in the shelter. The girl just sighed, saying she knew it would be like that. Naomi said the conversation was over, but at that moment Lucy noticed something strange. Erin began to take off her clothes, saying she had no choice. She declared that she was completely in his power, because she was a high elf, a princess, and had never been touched by anyone. She added that it would easily fetch 100 million coins at auction. Naomi instantly jumped up to her, grabbed it, and threw it over his shoulder. Erin screamed, asking what he was doing, and begged to be let go. But the boy carried her into the house and threw her sharply to the floor. She asked if he was really that rude. She said he could do whatever he wanted to her. The next moment, the guy threw something in her face. He started to swear, remembering that first Lucy had done this, and now she had too. He couldn't understand why all the girls in this world were so obsessed with this. Erin looked at him in astonishment. Naomi screamed, wondering what would happen if anyone saw her like this. He couldn't believe she really thought he could have something like that with the child. Erin said in confusion that he should do it when she grew up. She promised that he wouldn't regret it. Naomi sharply told her to shut up. He added that even if she was a former queen, he would not sleep with her or let her stay in the asylum. He asked sternly if she understood. Erin was stunned and silent. The boy ordered her to get dressed and leave immediately. He was furious. The girl was bitterly upset, saying that everyone she had met before had tried to rob her or sell her. She admitted that it was the first time she had met someone like Naomi. But the boy coldly thought that she could be offended as much as she wanted. He didn't care. But suddenly Lucy turned to him, He turned abruptly and asked what had happened. The girl hesitated, but still asked permission for Aaron to stay with them. The elf was stunned. Naomi sternly asked if Lucy had even heard what he had said. He explained that he was not going to keep a man obsessed with revenge in the asylum. But Lucy stubbornly said that Aaron had nowhere else to go. The boy replied that it was not their problem. Then Lucy exclaimed that she felt extremely sorry for the girl. Naomi only coldly reminded her that reckless actions could cost her her life. It was unwise to do something you would later regret. Lucy replied quietly that she understood, but she couldn't just leave her to her fate. Her eyes filled with tears. She confessed that her parents had also been killed. The room fell silent. Naomi looked at Aaron, who was also watching, confused. He took a deep breath and finally said that he understood why Lucy was so insistent. Naomi added that in the worst-case scenario, the girl would become an instrument for someone else's revenge. He was about to say something else, but Lucy interrupted him in a confident voice and declared that she was ready to take it upon herself. Naomi asked if Aaron truly sought revenge against the kingdom of Balk. She hesitated for a moment, but the boy reassured her, saying that he had no intention of rebuking or denying her, but that revenge would have to wait 3 years. The girl was surprised. He explained that in 3 years everything would change here. He would no longer be the head of the shelter, and even Lucy would grow up during that time. He set a condition. If Aaron wanted to stay, he had to accept these rules. She smiled and said she understood. Heading for the door, she declared that even if revenge was delayed, it was necessary to prepare for it now. Naomi let her do as she pleased, but sternly reminded her to change. He outlined a regimen: lunch at 1, snack at 3, dinner at 6, dismissal at 9, wake up at 7 and breakfast at 7:30. Aaron was shocked by this routine. Naomi explained that these were the rules of their shelter, and that she was free in everything else. The girl laughed and admitted that he reminded her of her father. She muttered that he was scolding his naughty daughter just like her father had once done. Naomi remained silent, only wondering in his mind if he thought she had seen tears in her eyes, for loneliness was too much for her to bear. But he didn't have time to think. Lucy took Aaron to his room, and Naomi decided that it was more important to prepare dinner right now. He was annoyed that he would now have to cook for 3 people. Meanwhile, Lucy held a small object in her hands and asked if it was really the head of a hard fruit. She said that she had found them the other day when she was wandering in the mountains in search of edible plants. The girl added that she had already changed into more comfortable clothes. Naomi nodded and said that they would prepare a bed for her today. Aaron looked at the buckets of corn cobs and asked indignantly what nonsense this was. She couldn't believe that Lucy had actually risked her life in the dangerous mountains for this. She called the girl stupid. Lucy turned to Naomi, asking what these ears of corn were for. The boy explained that they were fruits for growing, although in this world they had not yet learned how to properly cultivate them. He added that if they can be grown, they can be used on the farm, in cooking, and even sold at the market. Aaron said it sounded too simple, but immediately warned that she wasn't going to help them herself. Naomi ignored him and said he was going to tidy up the town. Lucy happily exclaimed that she would help him with that. The guy replied that the main condition was that she not get in his way. Lucy assured him that she wouldn't. She enthusiastically asked if it was necessary to weed the weeds by hand, because it was a waste of energy. Naomi asked in surprise what she was talking about. Then Aaron puffed out her cheeks and proudly exclaimed that she was a high elf and also from a royal family, so she could call on the sylphs, the spirits of the wind, for help. She boldly said that if they begged her, maybe she would help. Naomi just smiled and replied that they would manage on their own. The girl got angry and shouted, asking what he was doing. Naomi calmly repeated that their help was not needed. He added that they would do just fine together. Aaron trembled with resentment and angrily shouted that she didn't care. Lucy cautiously turned to Naomi, asking if he was doing the right thing. He looked at her in surprise, not understanding what was wrong. The girl explained that Aaron was really angry. Naomi was sure that the elf just wanted to show off her magic, prove that she was better than him, and take away his place as the head of the shelter. Hearing this, Lucy could barely contain her smile. Naomi noticed immediately and frowned, asking what was wrong with her face. She quickly put her hat on and said everything was fine. When they started cleaning, they saw how neglected the garden was. They pulled out the weeds, but they didn't get any smaller. Pulling out more and more weeds, Naomi stopped to rest and thought that they would hardly have time today. But suddenly a strong wind arose and began to tear the weeds right out of her hands and the ground. Feeling the powerful currents of air, Naomi immediately looked around. There he saw Aaron, who was using magic to disperse the wind. The boy sternly reminded her of his words that they would manage on their own. Lucy whispered tensely that Aaron just wanted to help. Naomi admitted that it was indeed faster. He allowed her to continue in the same vein. Hearing this, Erin was surprised and blushed slightly. Embarrassed, she abruptly exclaimed that she had only come to practice and had no intention of helping. She sternly warned him not to think otherwise. Naomi coldly replied that then she should practice somewhere else so as not to be a bother. The girl cried out angrily, asking how he dared to say such a thing. She demanded that he ask her properly, and only then, perhaps, would she help. Naomi cut her off, telling her to be quiet, because he could do just fine without her. Lucy laughed, thinking they were too similar. After a while, everyone returned to the shelter building. Erin thanked Naomi, praising how delicious everything was. Lucy asked the landlord if he was going to continue working in the garden today. The man said no, because they had already prepared the place for the beds, and that would be enough for today. He said that now all that was needed was to water it on time and get rid of the weeds and parasites every day. Lucy agreed and said that she would be busy with the city every day. Erin called it stupid. She sighed and explained that watering every day would only rot the roots. Naomi nodded and said that was why it needed to be watered every few days. He added that Erin was well versed in this, and upon hearing this, the girl was momentarily confused. She blushed and replied sharply that there was nothing strange about it. She said that one would have to be a fool not to know such obvious things. Naomi was surprised by the girl's behavior. He repeated more than once that he could do without her help, but she stubbornly tried to give advice and intervene. Suddenly a suspicious thought occurred to him. He looked at Erin, who was laughing shyly, and decided that she was acting strangely because she might have been watching them all this time. He decided that Erin wanted to steal his guide to growing cobs for a strong drink to make money for his revenge. The guy smiled sinisterly, believing that she had miscalculated because she was too naive to think she could outsmart him. Erin sighed and said he would go and cook the cobs. Lucy immediately exclaimed that she would help. Naomi sternly repeated that she should not interfere. He was glad inside, because he had expected her to come with them. While they were processing the cobs, Naomi explained to Lucy that the roots were poisonous, so they could only be handled with gloves. They had to be boiled first, and he warned Lucy not to even think about tasting them if she wanted to live. Erin was a little offended and remarked that Naomi was being unusually gentle with Lucy. The guy ignored her words and ordered Lucy to cut the eyes out of the cobs while he prepared the rest. The girl was surprised. Erin followed him and noticed that he was adding something. She asked what kind of powder it was. Naomi smiled, thinking that he was right. She needed his knowledge. It was a limestone mixture he had obtained from the ashes of seashells. He considered it extremely fortunate that he had prepared it in advance. The guy pointed out that she didn't even know what it was. Erin was surprised and demanded that he at least explain. Naomi coldly replied that she wouldn't tell her anything. Erin shouted angrily at him not to be so greedy and to share his knowledge. The guy just smiled, thinking that even her request sounded unnatural. He looked at her, thinking that her impatience and temper would eventually betray his true intentions. So he firmly refused. Hearing this, tears welled up in Erin's eyes, and she began to tremble with resentment. She shouted that she knew everything in advance, and he was only mocking her. After these words, she rushed out of the room. Naomi was confused, not understanding why she reacted like that, because he treated everyone the same way. He decided that she didn't need the technology and knowledge from his world at all. But suddenly Lucy came up and said that she knew what he was thinking. The guy was surprised. She apologized for her impudence and explained that she couldn't read minds. Lucy asked if Naomi could catch up with Erin and tell her he was worried. The boy abruptly replied that he wasn't worried, that she had run away because he had annoyed her, and that following her would only make things worse. Lucy quietly said that Erin had run away from home. Naomi was surprised, then immediately rushed after her. He understood her, because he had run away himself. His parents didn't care where he was, and they didn't even look for him. The worst thing was that the child didn't want to come back if no one came for him. He wasn't really worried, but he promised himself that he would make her come back at least for dinner. But suddenly he noticed two people at the entrance. He asked sharply why they were here, and reminded them that this was not a tavern or a tavern. The man laughed and said that Naomi was being too indulgent. The jewelry Erin had worn glittered in his hand. Naomi asked coldly what they had done to it. Meanwhile, Erin was wandering through the forest. She gave in to the impulse and just ran forward. She did not want to live on the roads again. Suddenly the wind rose, and the girl, exhausted, began to cry. After saying Musatsuzu's name, the girl suddenly heard footsteps behind her. She turned around sharply and asked who was there, but at the same moment someone's hand pinched her nose and she instantly fainted. Naomi, holding back her anger, demanded from the stranger where Erin was. The stranger only smiled and said that the guy was too hot-tempered to have a calm conversation. The man said that he would let Naomi talk while she still could because he would soon tear down this shelter. Naomi was surprised and coldly asked what he meant. The stranger brazenly declared that the boy had better back off, otherwise he would not vouch for Aaron's life. Naomi frowned and wondered what exactly this bastard was up to. He laughed and replied that Naomi didn't need to know the plans. He just had to stand by and watch their shelter turn to ruins. With a swing, the man demolished the wall. The woman next to him burst out laughing and mockingly asked if this was what he wanted to show her, enjoying the powerlessness of his hosts. The man boldly promised to turn this place to ashes. Naomi gritted her teeth, realizing that he was dealing with the usual self-confident scumbags who thought they were invincible. He called them scoundrels. The man mockingly wondered if anger had clouded Naomi's mind, and if that was all he could say. But the boy stood resolutely in a fighting stance. Suddenly, a whole flock of objects flew up behind Naomi. Pots, ladles, and frying pans crashed into the attacker, knocking him off balance. Unable to withstand the barrage of blows, the man fell to his knees and begged Naomi to stop. The objects immediately fell to the ground. The guy looked on in shock, not understanding what had happened. The intention was only to scare them away, but he had clearly gone too far. The man shouted, asking if Naomi understood the consequences that awaited him now. Naomi just said irritably that he had just cleaned the hall, and now he would have to clean it up again after this stupid performance. The woman suddenly screamed in horror, trying to understand what was happening. Naomi looked at her coldly and asked why she was still here. He ordered her to pick up her husband and get out of there. The woman angrily exclaimed how dare he address the prettiest girl in the whole city like that. She called him a worthless person, not even worth talking to. Naomi grimaced and asked ironically if she was joking, calling her brothel pathetic and worthless. Offended to the point of outrage, she exclaimed that she was the best in the capital, and peasants like him simply could not understand that. She proudly boasted of her body and beauty, declaring that every man in the land, even the king himself, desired her, and that everyone was crazy about her. Naomi only turned away in annoyance. Her scream was interrupted by Lucy's voice, who asked in fear if it was really chairs and knives flying at the man, and if Naomi was injured. The woman turned pale, because she had seen everything too. Naomi coldly replied that she was no different from the others, and that was enough to understand her place. He sternly reminded her of what happens to those who go against him. The woman looked at her companion in fear. Suddenly, a swarm of bees appeared behind Naomi, and she turned completely pale. She grabbed her husband and, apologizing as she went, ran away, begging that her face be left unharmed. In the hallway she screamed again, telling no one to touch her face. Lucy rushed to Naomi and asked where Aaron was. The boy answered grimly that she had been captured by the accomplices of those bastards. Lucy insisted that they must go and rescue the girl immediately. But Naomi said that she knew where she had been taken and that it was better for her to stay safe herself. His protective ability had worked at the moment of the attack, allowing him to not only heal Lucy, but also pinpoint Aaron's location. This was not just a defensive gift. Meanwhile, Aaron, already in captivity, berated herself for her mistake. Her dagger had been taken from her, and if these were human traffickers, she was doomed. She clenched her fists, determined to fight even at the cost of her life. But if she died, she would no longer be able to return to the shelter, fight alongside Musatsuzu, and learn from Lucy to help their home. Tears welled up in her eyes, for only now did she realize what a terrible place she had found herself in. Suddenly, a creaking sound was heard in the darkness. Aaron realized that someone had come for her. She was certain that she would be taken even further, so she prepared to attack, determined to fight to the last breath. The light hit her in the eye, and she instantly charged. With a powerful blow, she spun around to strike her attacker between the legs. But instead of an enemy, Naomi stood before her. He sternly asked her what she was doing and removed the bandage from her face. Aaron saw the unconscious kidnappers all around her, defeated by his strength. She said, embarrassed, that he had misunderstood. Naomi turned away, saying that she would leave if she didn't need his help. The girl thought he had come to save her, but instead of thanking him, she pushed him away. She immediately apologized. Naomi smiled and said she was joking. Aaron was surprised. The guy added that she was impulsive because she really was going to fight the kidnappers. He admitted that he had been through a lot and yet was not as brave as she was. Aaron disappeared. She asked if he would be sad if she was killed. The boy replied that everyone should sit down for dinner. If she didn't come every day, he would have thought she was dead a long time ago. Aaron thought she felt the same way. After all, her parents and loved ones were dead, and it was very difficult to eat alone. Naomi called her back to the shelter. He held out his hand and said that he would be sad without her. The girl blushed, thinking that he looked like a knight in armor. Naomi asked what she was doing and told her to get up. Aaron said she couldn't. He said it was expected. The girl cried, thinking he was going to leave. Instead, the hero lifted her into his arms, but suddenly the girl was seized by panic. He told her to calm down or she would fall. Her body was shaking. Her heart was beating so loudly that she was afraid he would hear it. He said to hold on tight or you'll fall. He grabbed her tighter and yanked her forward while Aaron screamed in fear. Lucy was worried why they hadn't returned yet. She believed that everything was fine, and all she had to do was wait. The door opened. Lucy met them and asked if everything was okay, but froze when she saw Aaron in Naomi's arms. He asked if the girl could stand. She said yes. Lucy was silent. Naomi said that it was over and he would sort out the mess he made on the way back. He asked Lucy to take care of Aaron. The girl put her hand on her shoulder. Aaron was scared when he saw her look. Lucy asked why they shouldn't talk. At that moment, more than the kidnappers or anything else in the world, Aaron was afraid of Lucy. Together they went out into the city. Naomi said that they had to prepare the store and went to get the box. Aaron sat down on the floor and said she couldn't help because she was already carrying things. She indignantly asked why she should do that. Naomi replied that he had no one else to rely on but the two of them, and there was nothing he could do about it. Aaron blushed at his request. She muttered that she couldn't help. Naomi asked why she was smiling. The girl exclaimed that it wasn't true. Lucy listened and laughed. They placed small plates on the table. Lucy wondered why the host had made tiny balls of strong drink. Naomi explained that they were samples. The girl didn't understand what that meant. Aaron exclaimed that this was their food or lunch. Naomi replied that it wasn't at all. He explained that they give samples to customers so they can taste the product. Aaron was outraged that they were just wasting money. Naomi said that if you sell it right away, people will think the food is poisoned or harmful. He added that they already knew its taste, but others wouldn't pay for a dish they knew nothing about. Aaron agreed. Naomi translated the conversation and ordered the preparations to be completed. He asked the girls to put up the sign in a prominent place. It said it was a limited edition, 1 per person, foreign food at a discount for a short time only. This was supposed to attract attention and create demand, because the product looked rare and unavailable. Aaron realized that anyone who missed the chance would never try it again. Naomi confirmed this. Aaron blushed when he praised her. He added that this was no time to study, as the store was already opening. They began encouraging people to try a drink they had prepared especially for the shelter, but the crowd was in no hurry to buy. Some even mockingly called their product roadstones, and an oppressive silence fell. Aaron blushed with shame, but Naomi just calmly said that it was natural. He looked strange, but his taste was beyond anything. Lucy approached a man in the crowd, timidly asking if he wanted to try it. The man grimaced, saying it looked bad. She ran to the others, but again she heard only refusals, the heavy words falling on her shoulders like a burden. She stopped another man, assuring him that he didn't even need to buy anything. The man replied that that wasn't the point. Lucy begged him to at least try it, to taste it. The man blushed, timidly took the ball, and for a long time did not dare to put it in his mouth. But he took a bite anyway, and the others noticed it immediately. When Lucy asked him, he replied that the look was bad, the smell was mediocre, but the taste was getting better. Naomi was surprised to hear that he had actually eaten it. He explained that the recipe came from Japan, but the man just frowned, saying that their food was strange. Naomi offered a special sale with a discount, and then the man smiled and took another serving. Lucy, unable to contain her joy, thanked him so loudly that everyone turned around and rushed to Naomi, saying that this was their first sale. Naomi warned that it was too early to celebrate, as there was still a lot left. But Lucy was beaming with happiness, and Aaron confidently exclaimed that they would sell out everything. Soon more and more people came, and soon they realized with joy that they had sold everything to the last crumb. But the problem was the scammers who stood in line demanding more. Even though Naomi explained that the product was out of stock, he said it was a good start and a time to celebrate. Aaron asked about her earnings, and Naomi replied that it was about 10,000. Not much, but enough for stability. He was not going to renege on his promise, because as the director of the shelter, he had to provide at least 3 meals a day for the children. That night, Naomi thought that she could only hold the market until merchants began to copy the idea. Strong drink could not be the only support. Suddenly, Lucy and Aaron came up and timidly asked to spend the night next to them. Naomi sighed wearily and allowed them, asking them to go to bed quickly. Lucy mumbled an apology and Aaron blushed, said she didn't want to but agreed anyway. The boy abruptly ordered them to close their eyes. Aaron flirtatiously remarked that she wouldn't mind sleeping next to him if he insisted. Although it was difficult for him, their presence gave him peace. As soon as darkness fell on Naomi, He heard his mother's voice begging him not to punish Masatsuga, and his father thundering, demanding silence. The boy begged them not to fight, but his voice was lost in the abyss. He opened his eyes, covered in cold sweat, and heard Lucy crying. The girl was sobbing, begging not to leave her, and Naomi hugged her, assuring her that he was there. Lucy thanked him through tears. She had been suffering from nightmares after her time at the ministry. Suddenly, Erin jumped up, screaming that someone was going to grab her, and started searching for a knife. She lost control until Naomi turned to her, bringing her back to consciousness. She burst into tears and threw herself into his arms. She too carried wounds within her. Her house burned down, she lived in exile, and this pain poisoned her soul. Once, in the middle of the night, she even attacked with a knife. Later, she cried for a long time, apologizing until she fell asleep. Naomi just sighed, finding them too troublesome. He himself had childhood traumas from his father, so now he would instantly wake up from the slightest rustle. His heart would stop every time. But what was most exhausting were Lucy's tears that broke the silence every night. Despite this, he endured because it was not as terrible as a life without sleep and a soul eroded by loneliness. He decided that until they got over their fear, he would have to sleep with them. When their wounds healed, they would be able to repay him for his care. He realized that he didn't like it, but at the same time he wasn't going to abandon the girls to their fate, because that was the essence of his current job. During the day, he watered the flowers, and Erin was bored and complaining, while Lucy admired how beautifully they bloomed, rejoicing in the steady income. Naomi noticed that the water was out, so they would have to go to the public well. Lucy readily agreed to help. He looked at Erin and said that she should go with him too, because she was bored, but she proudly agreed, declaring that he couldn't do anything without her. Naomi sighed, saying that it was not his right to demand too much, but the journey to the well was too long and tiring. Lucy quietly agreed. They looked with regret at the dry well near the house, dreaming of how easy it would be if it were filled with water again, although that seemed impossible. He threw the stone into the depths of the well, but suddenly a wild scream came from there, rapidly approaching. The girls were frightened, and Erin had already drawn his knife. Trembling, Erin and Lucy clutched each other's hands, their faces pale with horror. They whispered that it was impossible. Suddenly a hand gripped the edge of the well, and the girls screamed in terror, thinking they were looking at a ghost. Naomi froze, staring in a daze. A girl climbed out of the well and scolded Masatsugu for throwing stones at her. His face darkened with irritation. The stranger, with eyes full of tears, exclaimed that it was deadly dangerous to throw things at people. Suddenly Lucy heard a familiar voice and turned happily to the door. Erin came in, announcing that she was done with the weeds. Lucy praised her friend and promised to make her some tea right away. Erin asked in surprise where Masatsugu had gone. Lucy explained that the host had just finished chopping wood and had gone to the bathhouse to wash off his sweat. She quickly brought a kettle and a cup. Holding out the hot drink, Lucy said she had brewed it with leaves from their garden. Erin thanked her and sipped the tea slowly. After taking a few sips, she breathed a sigh of relief and asked why Lucy was sitting on the floor. She replied that it was more comfortable because she was sewing an apron. She held up the finished product and asked how she liked it. Erin laughed and sincerely praised the work, saying it turned out great. Lucy pointed to several stacks of fabric in the back and asked if Erin would like her to sew something personal for her. Surprised, Erin asked where so much fabric came from. Lucy explained that it was for blankets and tablecloths, and she had made pajamas out of it. The girl added that she once had to mend clothes at the ministry, and it was then that she learned many things. Hearing this, Erin blushed and awkwardly shouted for Lucy to sew her an apron too. Her friend was surprised but immediately cheered up. She happily agreed and even suggested doing it together, taking measurements for the future outfit with Erin. Erin was confused, then embarrassedly asked to teach her how to embroider, addressing Lucy sincerely and seriously. The stunned friend smiled broadly and happily agreed, promising to embroider the apron together. Erin exclaimed in confusion that this did not mean she was helping Masatsugu at all. Lucy agreed with a smile, although she did not believe it. Lucy laughed and, taking out the tape, asked her friend to stand up straight so she could take accurate measurements for the clothes. She carefully wrote down the measurements on a sheet of paper, while Erin watched with great interest. Lucy said that if the pajamas got too small, Erin should tell her right away and she would make new ones. Her friend thanked her and Lucy smiled sincerely. She added that the pile of clothes would become warm memories for them, because thanks to the kindness of the host, they would be able to cherish these moments forever. However, a shadow of sadness crossed her face. Erin noticed this and quietly asked what happened. Lucy waved it off as nothing important and raised her hands, announcing that all measurements were complete. Lucy happily recalled that the owner had said he would open the store in 3 days, so they needed to get everything done by then. Inspired, Aaron exclaimed that they would definitely make it and promised to help her friend. Lucy laughed and agreed. At that moment, Naomi walked past the room, fresh from the shower. He grimaced in displeasure at the girls' commotion, thinking they were making noise again. Suddenly, a short girl appeared, screamed desperately that it was dangerous to throw things at people, and immediately burst into tears. Masatsugu looked at her without much impression and said ironically that even meeting an impatient ghost in the morning was quite an event. Then he chuckled softly. His companions huddled together, exclaiming in terror that it was a real ghost. The ghost laughed and said that their frightened faces were more terrifying than her own. The girl who had been mistaken for a ghost sighed heavily and explained that she was not a ghost at all. She declared herself to be the supreme goddess responsible for all the water spirits of the continent and introduced herself as Shenchun. Then she winked at the boy and added that she could just call him Shichun. Masatsugu looked at her incredulously and said that he didn't have an older sister, so she should probably see a doctor. The goddess replied that she had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, so she was indeed the oldest. She asked if that was true, but the boy only remarked again that she was acting strangely. Indignant, the girl rushed to hug him and angrily reprimanded him for not believing her. Masatsugu only muttered something under his breath in displeasure. What angered her most was that he didn't believe her at the very moment she was finally able to appear before him to thank him. Meanwhile, Lucy hesitated, trying to understand what exactly the goddess wanted to thank their master for. Shichun asked if he was a god himself, since it was he who had cleansed the earth of its filth. She explained that thanks to this she had awakened and was able to lift the terrible curse. Masatsugu smiled calmly and said he understood and was happy for her. He apologized and added that their squad should move on, as there was still a lot of work ahead. His companions were ready to leave, but the girl rushed to stop them. She flew up to Masatsugu and pleaded that she wanted to thank him. The guy only asked her not to delay. The goddess blushed and said that the supreme goddesses only have one chosen one for life. She flew up to him again and declared that she had chosen him. Her cheeks were burning, her eyes closed, and she said that she wanted to marry him. Masatsugu apologized and said bluntly that he couldn't do it because he wasn't attracted to her at all. The goddess opened her eyes and cried out in shock. Masatsugu added that she should leave them now. She replied that she did not want to marry someone weaker than him, because only he was kind and able to stand up for himself. But the boy refused again, explaining that he was raising orphans and had a lot of things to do. The goddess seductively promised that if he agreed, he would become a god. Masatsugu just shrugged it off, saying he wasn't interested. She offered partial immortality, but that didn't impress the boy either. Shichun cried, and offered to fill the dry well so that he would no longer have to go to the city for water. She begged him not to throw her out, vowed never to speak of marriage again. Masatsugu looked at her with undisguised irritation and cursed. She pitifully begged him not to hate her. She called down a local divine rain. The guy coldly replied that he didn't hate her, but she annoyed him with her obsession. For a moment, the goddess calmed down and asked if he really did not hate her. Suddenly, the sky cleared. She leaned against him again and shyly asked if he would not mind taking her as his wife. Then Masatsugu suddenly declared that he had changed his mind because she only caused him negative feelings. The goddess was surprised and asked what that meant. At this moment, one of the girls quietly attracted the attention of the master. She apologized for interrupting his conversation with Shichun. Masatsugu abruptly pushed the goddess away and turned to her, asking what she wanted. The girl raised her hand grimly and said she needed to talk to Shichun. The companions grabbed Shichun by the arms and forcibly dragged her along, but she, stunned, didn't even have time to realize what was happening. Aaron stopped, glanced at Masatsuga, and took a step forward, coming closer, while he abruptly asked if she was going to leave with Shichun. Aaron looked at him intently and asked him seriously to listen, then spoke with undisguised irritation about the appearance of the goddess. Masatsugu only frowned and wondered what she meant. The girl became even more serious and said that in a few years she would grow up and her body would change, so he should remember that. With that, Aaron turned around, slammed the door, and left, leaving Masatsuga in amazement in front of the closed door as he tried to make sense of her words. There was weeping in the shelter. The goddess was sobbing, agreeing to become only the third wife, despite the fact that she considered herself the older sister. Masatsugu irritably remarked that he had no idea what the girls were talking about, and decided to move on to something more practical. He said that until she repaired the well, she shouldn't even think about staying. The water mistress waved her hand towards the well, confidently declaring that she already knew about it. She filled it again with water, and Masatsugu sternly remarked that such things should be taken more seriously. But the water did indeed appear, flowing in a plentiful stream, and the girls, their mouths open, watched in amazement and admiration, while Masatsugu, bending over the well, could not believe that such a thing was even possible. He scratched the back of his head and muttered that, of course, it was easier to get water now. But in return, he had gained another troublesome friend. But looking at the goddess, he thought that although she was over 100,000 years old, she was no different from Lucy in terms of intelligence. At that moment, Lucy approached Shichang and said with a smile that she was simply unsurpassed. The goddess confidently replied that she knew it herself. Masatsugu looked at them in complete surprise and thought that this was more like treating a dog than a child. Then he turned his head away and suddenly realized that the girl's water had been cleansed of filth thanks to his own skill. Masatsugu seriously wondered why his defensive skill was capable of doing this. He decided that there were still many things in his power that he didn't yet understand. He filled the tub with water, and then Lucy appeared nearby, saying that that was enough. Aaron praised them for their good work. Masatsugu gathered himself and said that he was going to take a cold bath, but Shichan watched him closely all the while. But suddenly she ran up and asked to wait, saying that she could also create hot water. The guy gave her a displeased look and asked what kind of nonsense this was. She crossed her arms over her chest and proudly declared that she could easily create the perfect temperature for hot water, even a luxury that the royal family had long been deprived of. Shichan asked hopefully if he could see that she could be useful now. Masatsugu looked at her without enthusiasm, but reluctantly agreed. Touched by such compliance, the goddess smiled, and he coldly replied that he was more inclined to perceive her not as a goddess but as some kind of sorceress. She angrily cursed him. At that moment, Lucy ran up to Masatsugu and cheerfully announced that she would wash him, including his back. But he dryly replied that he didn't need any help, because he could handle it himself. Aaron blushed and said that Lucy was only bothering the guy, so she would wash his back herself. Lucy shouted indignantly at her rival, and Masatsugu repeated confidently that he didn't need anyone. Then Shichan suddenly hugged everyone and said with a smile that in that case, everyone should go together and wash themselves well to get themselves in order. Masatsugu sharply hit the goddess and exclaimed that she was just annoying him. Shichan was offended and asked why he thought that. He strictly ordered not to make him repeat himself and once again stated that he would bathe alone. Lucy, blushing, said that the master had a perfectly logical reason for taking a shared bath. Masatsugu skeptically asked what it was. Lucy confidently explained that if the four of them didn't go swimming, they wouldn't be able to wash each other's backs. Masatsugu smiled and said he would consider her words if she could justify it better. He sighed and wondered what the problem was then, since everyone could easily wash their own back. Lucy closed her eyes and said that the boy must be very experienced and capable enough to handle it himself. But suddenly she opened her eyes and exclaimed that her and Aaron's bodies were too small, which would make it difficult for them to wash themselves without help. Masatsugu asked, embarrassed, if Aaron and Lucy really thought so. When they answered in the affirmative, he remarked that in that case they would only have to wash each other's backs. Lucy replied indignantly that this was a completely illogical decision. The boy raised his eyebrows sharply and asked if she had just accused him of being illogical. Lucy bowed her head and quietly denied it, saying she was not arrogant enough to say such a thing. Lucy gets serious and explains that if there are only 3 of them, they will form a triangle and will not be able to fully wash each other's backs. She insists that there should be 4. Masatsugu looks at the girl and admits that he understands everything. Lucy adds that it would take too long for the 3 of them and they would risk catching a cold. That's why, in her opinion, it makes more sense for all 4 of them to go wash at the same time. Shichan decisively grabs everyone's hands and pulls them to the bathhouse. She says she's tired of arguing and suggests going to the bathhouse to wash away her fatigue and find peace. Everyone enters the bath. Shichan spreads his arms and admires the spaciousness of the bath. Lucy sits on the tiles and says that this is no longer a sauna, but a real hot spring. Aaron at this time admits that the last time she bathed was a year ago. Lucy snuggles up to Masatsugu and says it's very warm next to him. Masatsugu leans forward, feeling her closeness. Then he remarks that it's just hot water. Aaron smiles and says that despite his words, he's happy to have the girls around. Masatsugu tenses up and asks why she thinks that. Aaron asks him to forget and reminds him that it's time to wash their backs. Shichan exclaims happily. Everyone sits down one by one and starts rubbing their backs. Aaron looks back and smiles and asks if he's happy. She says he's honored to wash the princess's back. Masatsugu smiles too and says that it is a real honor for him. He even claims that he is so happy that he can barely contain his excitement. Aaron blushes and covers her face with her hand. She stands up abruptly and asks what it all means. She says he talks like a knight, her breathing hitches, and she can't calm down. Masatsugu raises his sponge and asks if he can continue. He turns to Aaron, who is still standing there, red with embarrassment. The girl sits with her back to him. The guy starts rubbing her back. Eren blushes again and asks him not to stop. The masseur wonders what is happening now. Shichen jumps on his back and asks to wash her too. The guy notices how tightly she clings to him and looks at him in disbelief. Shichen smiles and asks if he was really confused because she hugged him so tightly. Masatsugu answers in the negative. He looks at the girl grimly and says that it feels like a cow hugging him. Shichen screams in anger and indignation, declaring that she is not an animal. Masatsugu says he doesn't care. He asks the girl to let Eren wash her back. Shichen gets angry and says he wants only him to do it. Masatsugu sighs heavily and looks at her with displeasure. He agrees and says he will show her the traditional backwashing method from his world. Masatsugu asks to create a lot of water to make it look like a waterfall. Shichen agrees. The girl begins to cast spells and says that she can even cause rain over a vast area. She raises her hands and creates a powerful splash of water. Masatsugu asks to make the water as cold as possible. She obeys. Then he orders her to stand under the stream. Shichen steps under the cold water and screams, thinking it is training under a waterfall. Masatsugu realizes that she knows about this ritual. He says that in his homeland, this method of purification was used for religious ceremonies, and that it is entirely befitting a goddess like Shichen. Suddenly, the girl screams for him to stop because it's inappropriate. Masatsugu pushes her forward and says he's fed up with her. He demands that she stay put. Shichen is left under the icy stream and screams loudly. She looks back and asks if he really wants her to feel this bad. She grabs his hand and pulls him towards her. She says he should feel the same way. Shichen forcibly pulls him under the waterfall despite his screams. Masatsugu falls into the stream and screams from the cold. He curses at the goddess and calls her a fool. Shichen screams back that she will not let him go. Lucy looks at the owner excitedly and wants to help. Eren says that this time Masatsugu won't go anywhere. Shichen yells at Masatsugu. She asks if he knows why she woke up from her 1,000-year sleep. She admits that it was only to play family with him. Masatsugu says he doesn't care. He asks the girls to go and play somewhere else. Shichen yells at him again. Masatsugu angrily says that he did promise to teach Lucy the game, but he didn't promise to play with Shichen. Lucy insists that only Masatsugu can fulfill the role of a father. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. The boy looked around and asked what other visitor had come to visit them. An elderly man entered the shelter and apologized for disturbing them so early in the morning. He greeted Masatsugu. Behind him appeared a man with a scar on his face. Masatsugu noticed that the old man was leaning on a stick. He was alerted by the stranger walking behind him. The old man smiled. It seemed to him that Masatsugu was really skilled. He had read about him in the newspaper and was glad he hadn't believed the gossip. Masatsugu asked what the old man needed, since people like him had no business in his orphanage. The old man apologized and said he had a very important conversation. He asked if he could come in. The visitors didn't look like they would be easy to turn down, so Masatsugu agreed and invited them inside. The old man introduced himself as Kinberg Taitano, head of the Kinberg family. He pointed to the man behind him, introducing him as his son Theo, the future head of the family. Masatsugu replied that he was pleased to meet them. The old man noted that their families had had previous affairs. Masatsugu asked if they were talking about kidnappers. The guy assumed that the old man had come to take revenge. He even felt better, because in that case he could have done the same thing as the couple before they were handed over to the authorities. But the man asked him not to jump to conclusions. He raised his hand and said that he had no intention of following the kidnapper's path. He asked Masatsugu to calm down. Masatsugu narrowed his eyes and asked why he had come. The man replied that such arguments were bad for an old man's heart. He explained that the kidnappers were collecting a debt from the previous director of the shelter. They had already caused damage, so they planned to drive them out of the family. He knew that the previous director had disappeared for a long time, and only a month ago he found out that a new manager had appeared and realized that this was no longer the old one, but a different person. The man added that the kidnappers tried to complete the task in a different way, which is why the problems arose. Masatsugu stopped him and said that he still didn't understand why he had come. He emphasized that there was no point in explaining to him that he had no involvement in his predecessor's death. He also did not remember the king saying anything about debts. At this point, the old man asked his son to show him a document. He asked Masatsugu how familiar he was with the asylum system. The boy asked him about the system. The old man explained that the lands and privileges of the refuge were separate from the country and belonged exclusively to the leader. In particular, this shelter still belonged to the previous manager. He showed the document as evidence and added that the manager's job is only to properly manage affairs. Masatsugu guessed that he wanted to use the asylum's privileges as payment for his debt, so he forced them to leave the place. The boy looked at him and asked if he could start with a partial payment. The old man replied that this was a special case because there had been no payments for a long time. He wanted to get everything as soon as possible. Masatsugu asked how much the debt was. The old man replied, 10 million. The young man thought for a moment, thinking the amount was too much, and asked if he could pay a third or find another option. The old man refused and said they should think about it. The girls ran out of their rooms and screamed that they didn't want the shelter to be closed. They fell to the floor and burst into tears. Aaron tearfully promised to be obedient, just to stay at the shelter. Shichen also cried, saying she didn't want to go. Masatsugu looked around and asked what they were talking about. Lucy hid behind the sofa and whispered that she had heard the shelter being taken away as payment for the debt. Masatsugu replied firmly that he would not allow that to happen. He looked over and asked the girls if they really thought the head of a wealthy family had come all this way to come to their poor shelter just for the sake of a debt. The old man agreed, saying that the boy was right. He admitted that he had a task for him. He named Masatsuga a candidate for S-rank adventurers and instructed him to bring 5 mid-level recovery potions. He promised that if the boy completed the task, he would consider repaying the debt. Masatsugu was wary of the potion. He was tense that the old man knew about his conversation with Doran and his status as a candidate. Aaron leaned forward and explained that the potion was like medicine. It could heal wounds and even act as an antidote to poison. But she continued and pointed out that mid-level potions were rare, even in the city market. Even the elves, who were masters at potion making, made them infrequently and rather haphazardly. The old man explained that they were being collected all over the country, but it was still not enough. His son was seriously ill and needed mid-level recovery potions. Theo's father and grandfather bow their heads, acknowledging their own powerlessness. The old man, with a trembling voice, says that Masatsugu is their last hope, and begs him to accept the task. At this moment, Masatsugu thinks about his father's love and the family's path, but for him, it was foreign and empty. He had lost everything in his childhood, and now he felt no connection to it. Walking down the street, he suddenly hears a voice calling him to stop. Looking back, he sees Lucy gasping for breath. Masatsugu sternly asks what she and the others are doing here. The girls reply that they have sworn to help him. Lucy asks hopefully if he is really looking for the ingredients for the potion. She is sure that this time they will be useful to him. Shichan winks and declares that she will protect the shelter, promising to do anything for Masatsugu. Aaron smiles and reminds her that with her knowledge of brewing potions, he will definitely need their help. Lucy is embarrassed, but boldly says that she can find the right herbs by smell, and asks why that would be a bad thing. Masatsugu just glances away and mumbles quietly. He moves on, coldly saying that the girls can do as they please. They look at each other and burst into smiles. They joyfully exclaim that together they will definitely protect their shelter. Erin begins to draw a diagram on the ground with her stick. She explains that potions are medicines created by mixing plant leaves with a highly concentrated magical liquid. The girl says that this time they need curare plants and a magic liquid. She suggests starting by searching for herbs. Erin turns to Lucy. She jumps up sharply and solemnly declares that her team can rely on her. Lucy is beaming with happiness. It's finally her turn to help the owner. She decides to find as many of the plants she needs as possible. Straightening up, Lucy focuses and activates her abilities. Opening her eyes, she points to the side and says she can smell the scent of curare plants. Masatsugu notes that he expected something like this from the animal race. The other girls ask Lucy not to run too far. Masatsugu sternly remarks that the girl must stay close so they can protect her. Lucy stops abruptly, apologizes, and, with a smile, admits that she couldn't help herself. Aaron notices that Masatsugu spoke like a true knight. Lucy confidently asks him for protection. Shichan laughs and pokes the boy. Masatsugu mentally reproaches himself for having gone alone. Lucy happily exclaims that they have found the right plant. As she approaches the tree, she notices that the smell is much stronger here, so curare grows in these places. Shichan runs up to Lucy and cheerfully says that she also found a lot of the necessary plants. Shichan asks Lucy to check if he is wrong. She excitedly declares that she feels great and confident in her discovery. Lucy leans over to the plant and says that it's not curare at all, but gift, a herb used to make poisons. Shichan exclaims indignantly. Lucy explains that curare has a slightly sweet aroma, unlike gift. Shichan argues that it is difficult for a novice to distinguish such a subtle difference, and insists that Lucy examine each plant. Masatsugu approaches and asks permission to inspect the herbs. He immediately distinguishes between gift and curare, and orders the correct plants to be set aside separately. Returning to Aaron, Masatsugu asks how many plants are needed for the potion, but Aaron abruptly stops him and asks how he even knows how to tell the difference between herbs. Masatsugu replies that the difference is not only in the letter. Aaron smiles in surprise and waits for an explanation. He shows her the stems. In Kurare they are round, and in GIF they are semicircular. Lucy looks at him in admiration, impressed by his observation. Masatsugu replies that for those who survived on wild plants, this is a basic rule. Aaron, stunned, asks about wild plants, and he confirms that he ate them. The guy admits there were times when he simply had no other choice to satisfy his hunger, and he had to eat whatever came his way. Aaron refuses to believe it because even the older elves do not know such subtleties. Masatsugu says that in his area, for people interested in cooking, this is normal. For him, distinguishing Kurare from gift is as easy as distinguishing garlic from onion. Aaron asks, stunned, if this is true. Masatsugu and the girls stacked all the collected plants, and Aaron said with relief that it was quite enough, even more than needed. She explained that their goal was not simple. They were not preparing an ordinary potion, but a medium-level one, which is why they needed a much larger amount of herbs. The girl added that first they needed a magical liquid. Shishan, smiling, volunteered to create it and began to weave a water spell. Aaron watched in fascination and confessed that she had never seen such a beautiful combination of water and mana, which did not dissipate as usual, but shone steadily. Shichin smiled, saying that her spell could last for years. Aaron picked up the mortar and pestle with the herbs, and said with concentration that now was the time to start mixing. She explained that first you need to grind the curare to a thick gel state, then add the magical liquid and, while stirring, carefully monitor the reaction through the prism of mana. However, the girl admitted that this stage was the most difficult, and with a sigh, she began to stir the mixture. Finally, Aaron announced that everything was ready. Everyone looked at the potion in surprise, and she asked who could judge the result. Masatsugu calmly said that it was an ordinary potion. Aaron picked up the infusion and turned to her friends. Lucy said that everything worked out, and Aaron himself admitted that the success was due to the quality of the magical liquid. That's why they managed to make a simple potion on the first try. She added that the process was clear. Now they needed to make more infusions. Lucy said firmly that she wanted to try it herself, and Shichin warmly supported her. Lucy looked seriously at her friends and said that now it was her turn. She promised to do her best. She began to pound the herbs and asked if she had enough raw materials. Aaron carefully examined the mortar and advised her to pound until the mixture became sticky. Masatsugu noticed from the side that they had very few plants left. However, Lucy insisted that it was time to move on to mixing. Aaron wished her luck. The girl carefully mixed everything, sighed heavily, and said she had done it. Closing her eyes, she asked Masatsugu to evaluate the potion. The boy looked at it and said coldly that it was a failure. Lucy cried out in disappointment. She angrily said that the process was very complicated. Aaron explained that it took a lot of training to create a quality potion, but even a failed healing drink could at least quell hunger. Lucy dared to taste it and winced with bitterness. Aaron smiled and remarked that at least she was holding the cup with good manners. Lucy thanked him. Here, Shichan intervened, stating that now it was her turn, and she would brew a high-level potion to prove to Masatsugu the power of the divine spirit. She began to briskly crush the leaves, then abruptly poured the magical liquid into the mixture. She excitedly shouted that the decisive moment had arrived and asked Masatsugu to watch carefully, but he only reluctantly told her to work more quietly. Shichan poured mana into the process and exclaimed loudly. Masatsugu felt that this alchemy was going differently than in the case of Aaron, and realized that he was truly a guide of water spirits. She held up the finished potion and told everyone to watch. Aaron leaned over, looked, and exclaimed in fear that it was dangerous. It was about to explode. She threw it away, and Masatsugu and Lucy looked at each other in surprise. There was an explosion. When the smoke cleared, Masatsugu emerged from it, holding his side, but he said with relief that he had managed to protect the girls and that his defensive skill had worked. Shichan burst into tears and began to apologize. Masatsugu looked at her and sternly asked if she was truly a divine spirit, since her actions could have killed them. When the smoke finally cleared, the girls were already stacking mortars and bottles, saving what was left. Aaron carefully examined the collected vials and admitted that she could only make a simple potion, as there was a problem when trying to create a medium-level one. Lucy whispered guiltily that it was her fault, because she was useless. But Shichan objected, saying that it was her own fault as the older sister who couldn't save their home. Lucy burst into tears and confessed that she didn't want to leave anyone. Shichan sobbed that she didn't want to be separated either. Masatsugu picked up the bottle and asked ironically how much longer they would have to complain senselessly, since they should test the drink itself. Aaron looked at him and said that he couldn't control his magic, but the boy firmly replied that in that case he had to at least try. The girls look at Masatsugu in surprise, not understanding where he gets such confidence and determination from at a time when everyone has lost hope. He lifts the plant, begins to slowly grind it to the desired consistency, and then carefully adds the other ingredients and mixes them. The guy takes the finished potion in his hands, concentrates, putting his magic into it, and when he opens his eyes, he calmly says that he managed to create a medium-level potion. The girls look at him and the bottle in admiration, not believing what they are seeing. They run to Masatsugu, hug him, and happily exclaim that he is incredible, thanking him. Eren asks in surprise why the potion worked this time. Masatsugu explains that there are 2 reasons, and the first is the freshness of the ingredients. Eren explains how exactly this affects the result. The guy compares making a potion to making regular vegetable soup, hinting that the principles of cooking and alchemy are similar. The girl looks at him incredulously. Masatsugu assures her that he noticed this while she was working, explaining that using mana is like adding spices. She is surprised, as she has never heard of such a thing. Masatsugu adds that creating a potion is an extremely complex process that requires patience and care. Eren gets angry and says that it usually takes decades to reach this level. The guy admits that the cooking example may seem strange. He explains that just as making soup requires chopping vegetables, pasta, and the right combination of broth and spices, alchemy is based on the harmony of ingredients. He emphasizes that the freshness of the ingredients is key. He recalls how in the past he used to go to markets to check the quality of the vegetables with his own eyes and touch them. The girl is surprised that their mentor was involved in such mundane tasks. Masatsugu smiles and reminds her that he always checked the quality himself, while Lucy recalls that everything was a little different. The guy talks about the second reason for success, the infusion of a large amount of pure mana. Lucy mentions the difficulty of controlling her teacher's magic. Masatsugu agrees and confirms her words. He then says that he used some of the magic of rebirth by simply pouring his energy into the liquid, and everyone around him freezes in amazement. Eren is outraged and asks who in their right mind would use such great magic as rebirth just to create a potion. Masatsugu calmly explains that this is what makes the magical fluid highly compatible, as rebirth restores living beings filled with the magical fluid, which he compares to blood. If this is not the case, the theory simply won't work. Having finished explaining, he falls silent. Eren's face darkens, but she admits that once the result is in, she has no choice but to believe it. She notes that this discovery could turn all the alchemy books upside down. Shichan covers his mouth with his hand and says that if this becomes known, there will be a real commotion. Lucy happily exclaims that this is a victory of reason. Masatsugu clutches the vial in his hand and warns that it is better to keep this method a secret, because money matters always lead to trouble. He adds that now they can complete the task and save the asylum. Eren agrees, although he says that some priorities will have to be reconsidered. Masatsugu calls for the creation of 4 more potions immediately. Everyone happily picks up on his words. The guy holds 5 finished bottles in his hands and confidently declares that the job is done. Lucy smiles and says that now they definitely won't lose their shelter. Suddenly, Masatsugu freezes, abruptly covers Lucy's mouth with his hand and orders her to be quiet. Everyone looks away warily, and he says that someone is approaching. Within seconds, monsters jump down from the trees, staring at Masatsugu with predatory eyes. Shichan exclaims in horror that they are wind goblins, forest assassins who operate in coordinated groups, using skills in turns. She explains that they are considered the strongest of their kind, equal to S-rank monsters. One of the goblins says they were hiding for loot, but they found something much more interesting. The goblin leader claims to have smelled a high-quality potion and assures them that their king will be delighted. Eren doesn't understand which king he's referring to. The goblin demands that all the potions be given back, warning that otherwise they will be destroyed. Lucy glares at the enemies and shouts for them to stop their jokes. She declares that these potions are more important than their lives. Eren adds that they have nothing to give to the vile creatures. Shichan also stands up for them. The goblin smiles ominously and asks if Masatsugu's squad has truly decided to accept defeat, hinting at their hopelessness. Masatsugu and his team strive to protect their shelter from this danger, but it is unknown whether they will be able to emerge victorious from the inevitable confrontation. While the goblin boasted that Masatsugu's squad had doomed itself to defeat, the boy was already looking around intently and preparing for battle. Their entire group found themselves in the ring of the strongest race of goblins, known for their impeccable coordination. One of the goblins rushed forward, mocking Masatsugu and his companions. He believed that if they had not resisted, they could have avoided the bloody consequences. But suddenly his gaze froze, as his friend next to him howled in pain and fell to the ground, his arm missing. The goblin leader was stunned and could not comprehend what had just happened. Masatsugu held the goblin's severed hand in his palms, squeezing it with all his strength. His gaze burned with cold fury, and his words sounded like a sentence. They screamed even louder than even shy. The angry goblins growled, but Masatsugu calmly said that at first he had hoped to settle everything peacefully. But when they dared to take the lives of his foster children, he no longer intended to hold back. He threw back his hand and menacingly declared that it was time to exterminate all this scum that dared to threaten his family. One of the goblins indignantly asked who he had called parasites. Another added that they were the elite and would not allow Masatsugu to treat them like that. The chief pointed at the boy, swearing that he would not allow him to humiliate their kind. Lucy cried out in fear, feeling the air tighten. But Masatsugu was at the leader in an instant and stabbed him with his blade. Then he grabbed his arm and threw him back with force like a doll. While the others watched in shock as their comrade fell, Masatsugu had already snatched their own knives right out of their hands. The goblins turned pale in surprise. Their cries of rage echoed around them as Masatsugu sharply swung his knives at them. The chief saw the weapons flying towards his brothers, and his eyes filled with savage hatred. He roared, shaking the forest. Masatsugu slowly turned around and faced the rest of his enemies with a cold gaze. Frightened, they decided to flee, at least to inform the king of the encounter. But the boy pulled out a knife and with cold determination threw it at the fugitive, saying that he would not let anyone escape. The goblin fell, blood pouring onto the ground. Masatsugu stood silently among the corpses for a while, then quietly said that they were wasting their time. It was time to go back. Lucy ran to him with relief, genuinely happy that he was thinking of their safety first. Masatsugu only smiled mockingly in response. Aaron remembered his words about the daughter of the shelter and felt a strange warmth. Shichon blushed in embarrassment, not understanding why this made her so embarrassed. Masatsugu picked up the basket and sternly reminded the girls not to get carried away. He explained that it was the director's duty to ensure the safety of the orphans, and that was his first priority. However, the joy on the girls' faces did not fade. The boy looked around and called for everyone to move on. The squad obediently followed him. They were returning, but everyone thought it strange that there was not a single living soul in sight in the city. Lucy was surprised to see that the streets were usually full of people buying dinner at this time. Aaron turned to Masatsugu, asking if there might be some kind of holiday that day, but the boy noticed two men. He immediately recognized them as his former classmates and wondered what they were doing here. Lucy, noticing his strange expression, quietly asked what happened. Masatsugu replied that everything was fine and turned away, taking one last look at his former comrades. An old man arrived at the shelter again. His path immediately crossed with Masatsugu. The guy asked what Titano was doing in their house. The old man found it difficult to dare to say unpleasant words. He reported that by order of the king, it had been decided to confiscate the asylum. The girls stared at him in shock. Masatsugu, with a grim expression on his face, realized that new problems were on the horizon. He could not understand what had prompted this order. The boy sharply asked if the old man was really going to take his house away from him. He explained that they planned to pay off the asylum's debts with medium recovery elixirs, and even negotiated a deferment. All the girls unanimously supported Masatsugu. Lucy burst into tears, calling Titano horrible. It hurt her that even after the potions master's success, everything had turned out so unfair. The old man began to guess the true reasons for the asylum's debts and tried to say something, but Masatsugu abruptly cut him off. The boy replied that he didn't care. The man noticed that Masatsugu was becoming angrier and angrier every day. He made excuses, saying that he was only following the kingdom's orders. Masatsugu coldly asked if the man really believed that the kingdom's finances had nothing to do with his shelter. The man confirmed this information without hesitation. The man explained that when war broke out, there would be no room left to store equipment for the army. And then the king would stop caring about appearances and start sowing the land at any cost. The boy asked if the girls had heard anything about the relations with the neighboring kingdom. He recalled that he had spoken about it this morning and claimed that things were very bad there. Suddenly a man ran up to them, drawing Masatsugu's attention. The boy recognized him as Doran. The man frantically begged to hear him out. Masatsugu sighed gloomily, because first the mafia boss appeared to him, and now the guildmaster. This was starting to seriously annoy him. Doran reported that the Goblin March had begun. He claimed that their procession would pass right here at noon. Aaron and all the girls shuddered in shock upon hearing the news. Masatsugu looked at the man suspiciously, waiting for an explanation. Meanwhile, officials had already gathered on the street. They had just finished evacuating the city's residents. The blonde declared that it was time to prepare and called on everyone to move forward with him. The dark-haired boy raised the issue of the goblin invasion. He didn't understand why so much importance was attached to the passage of the Goblin King through their kingdom. The hooded girl said that this was a legendary event that always left behind only ruins. She explained that when the Goblin King is born, the scattered tribes begin to gather together and form an army. And on that day, they all go on a campaign. The short-haired girl wondered if the Goblin King really intended to start a war, because without him, the goblins would lose their organization again. But before they could reach the king himself, they would have to go through thousands of his personal guards. The dark-haired boy dismissed her doubts. He emphasized that they were heroes from another world and could not lose even to a huge number of goblins. The girl in the hood looked at him and said that she unconditionally believed in his victory. The boy drew his sword and declared that it was time to make his legacy known in the history of the kingdom. He declared that he would defeat the king with the sacred blade. He began to swing his sword while the rest of the squad warned him of the danger. The dark-haired boy smiled sinisterly and spoke disparagingly of the goblins. He declared that they were not dangerous enemies, and added that while they rested during the day, he would deal with all these pests. The girl looked ahead with a gloomy look. Masatsugu finally realized what was happening. Lucy repeated that they were facing a direct confrontation with the goblins. Aaron said sharply that no one could stand against an entire army of goblins, no matter how many heroes there were. This could be considered a death sentence. Masatsugu found it hard to believe that these spoiled boys would be able to participate in a real bloody battle, let alone a war. He wondered why they had made such a choice. The boy thought that now they felt the same as in the previous world. Masatsugu said that under the circumstances, he wouldn't have time to meet with them before the events began. The man became more serious, and then fell to his knees, begging Masatsugu to help save the kingdom. He asked if the entire adventurer guild really relied on him alone. Masatsugu asked in surprise if the entire alliance really relied on a newcomer with such a dubious past. The man pulled a scroll from his pocket and explained that the guild operated on a merit system. Masatsugu glanced at the scroll and was surprised to see his own achievements there, comparing it to trading. The man recalled that thanks to Masatsugu's exploits, destroying the orichalcum sword and taming the rampage of an A-rank adventurer, all the leaders had unanimously approved of him. He emphasized that Masatsugu is without a doubt one of the few who possesses S-level strength. The man explained that the guild could only muster about 300 people, and there was no one but him capable of leading their combined 10,000 warriors. He added that if they wanted to save their homes from the goblin invasion, they absolutely needed Masatsugu's power. The man continued to persuade him, emphasizing that the other S-rank adventurers would not be back before noon tomorrow. If this continued, the kingdom would be destroyed. He pleaded with Masatsugu once more. Masatsugu asked Doran to look up. He said he understood the situation. Doran looked up and asked what decision he had made. Masatsugu smiled and replied that he was leaving. Doran pleaded fervently to save the country. Masatsugu looked at him indifferently and said that he wanted no part in it, which shocked the man. Dora asked him why he refused. He tried to convince him that the fall of the country would also entail the destruction of the asylum. Masatsugu replied that it was not his duty. He was serving at the orphanage, so they should ask other warriors for help. Dora did not give up and continued to beg. He tried to tempt him with a large fee. First he offered 5 million, then he raised the bet to 10 million. Masatsugu looked at the man disdainfully and said that he didn't really care about the issue of buying out the orphanage. At that moment his eyes widened, realizing something important. He said the solution was quite simple. The man asked what was the matter. Masatsugu said that something good had happened because he had figured out how to solve all the problems. Lucy gave him a surprised look. Masatsugu approached the head of the Kinberg family and told him to stop demanding a ransom for Luna's shelter. The man wanted to object, but Masatsugu demanded to hear him out. Then he turned to the guildmaster and asked if he was really willing to pay 10 million. He confirmed and swore in the name of Guildmaster Doran. Masatsugu closed his eyes and said that he wanted the money paid to the Kinberg family. Everyone looked at him in shock. The guildmaster asked what that meant. Masatsugu explained that it was the only condition under which he would accept the task. The guy clarified that in this case, the orphanage's debts would be paid off, and the Kinberg family would get theirs. Then the guild would be able to officially hire him, but the fee would have to be paid in advance. The guildmaster smiled and replied that he could not refuse such a deal. He believed that with Masatsugu's help, they would defeat the goblins. Masatsugu approached the head of the Kinberg family and asked if he agreed to these terms. The man confirmed that as the head of the family, he accepted his offer. Masatsugu said that everything was settled then, but he noted that he would only do it once, as he had no other way to protect the shelter. Everyone dispersed. Masatsugu turned around and saw Lucy wearing a bowler hat and holding a fork. She said she wanted to go with him. Aaron came up to them and said he would join them too. Aaron said he wanted to protect his new home. Chan also approached them, emphasizing that without shelter they would have nowhere to go. She added that one cannot rely on Masatsugu forever. They must protect their home together because they are a family. Masatsugu thought about what she had said about family. He looked at the orphanage and realized that this was the place their family always returned to. He was glad that his students were so diligent. He smiled and agreed that they should defend the home as a family. All day long, the residents of the shelter prepared for battle. Aaron unfolded the map on the table and pointed to the place where the battle would begin on the Nylian plains. Aaron said that if they left immediately by wagon, they would be in time for the battle to begin. Lucy looked at the map and noticed that it would be a good idea to join the adventurers and the army to gather information. Masatsugu rejected this idea. He pointed to the point where their real target would be. It was the Nile Plains to the northwest. Masatsugu and the girls arrived at the place. The guy put down their bags and said that they would stay here for a day. As if at a camp, he asked the girls to help set up the tent. Lucy took food out of the bag and said she had some soup. Shi-chan was enjoying it. Masatsugu came over and sternly reminded them to keep the fire to a minimum as they were not out for a walk. Aaron suddenly shouted, asking what they were doing in this place. She emphasized that no allies, not even goblins, would come here. Masatsugu calmly replied that they didn't need to face the army. All they had to do was track down the Goblin King. Lucy laughed softly and said that according to Doran, it would be very difficult to find the king. Shi-chan reminded her that the kingdom had already tried but failed. Masatsugu confidently declared that victory was possible if the situation was properly exploited. He said that the army would only be a decoy. The girls looked at him in surprise and asked what it meant. Masatsugu sighed and wondered if they still didn't understand. He explained that when the royal army arrived, the goblins would be busy fighting. Aaron exclaimed that then they could strike. Masatsugu approved her idea, and the girl was delighted by the praise. Shi-chan looked at him with admiration and said that he was incredible. She believed that this was how he could save the world. Masatsugu said that he needed all of his female students to carry out the plan. Lucy asked if it was really all of them, and he confirmed. Then he asked them to go to bed early. Everyone lay down to rest. But in the middle of the night, Masatsugu woke up and realized that it was deep night. Usually he wasn't nervous, but this time was different. However, looking at the sleeping students, he smiled. It seemed to him that they were taking the battle much more easily than he was. Turning his head, he noticed that Lucy was not in the tent. He wondered what the girl could have planned. Lucy stood alone under the stars. Masatsugu wondered what she was thinking. He went up to her and asked if she really couldn't sleep. Lucy looked back and looked at him timidly. Masatsugu wondered why she was looking at him so strangely and asked if she thought he was a monster. Lucy replied that she didn't think so at all. They were silent for a while. Then Lucy asked why he was awake himself. She confessed that when she first saw him, she thought he was cold and deceitful. Masatsugu wanted to explain his behavior, but Lucy interrupted him, saying that she was mistaken. He asked what she meant. The girl blushed and said with a smile that he cared about them, although he would never admit it himself. Lucy asked if they really caused him problems. She added that he complained but always acted in their favor. Masatsugu objected, saying that taking care of them was nothing more than child's play. He added that he was just pretending to do it and didn't need any gratitude. Lucy smiled and said that he was right. They fell silent again. Then Lucy spoke of her homeland. Masatsugu was surprised why she mentioned her hometown. The girl told him that her hometown of Karana was located in the north, in the kingdom of Vardzum. She said that the view reminded her of home. She remembered how she would gaze in awe at the moon there and often ask her parents to take her there. Lucy closed her eyes and added that a lot of time had passed. And although it seemed to her that the memories were fading, they were coming back again. Masatsugu apologized for interrupting her thoughts. Lucy replied that everything was fine, and on the contrary, she was glad to meet him. The girl admitted that she was very lonely and often wanted to cry. But when she was next to Masatsugu, all the bad feelings disappeared. She grabbed his apron and told him he was a wonderful person. She added that she gained courage around him. Masatsugu was impressed by her sincerity. Lucy steps back a little and says quietly that that's why she decided to thank him, if he doesn't mind. Then she turns her head sharply and looks at the boy seriously. Masatsugu wonders what's happening to her. The girl's cheeks flush. Her words are confused, but she still says that if he doesn't mind, she wants to thank him for his kindness. She timidly offers her body. Masatsugu looks on without emotion, and first clarifies what she means. But in a moment he comes to a conclusion and says he understands. He smiles and adds that it's not a bad idea. Lucy looks at him with a stunned expression on her face. She asks if he's sure, and if he really doesn't mind. The guy replies with a slight smile that he's even looking forward to it. Lucy covers her face with her hands in confusion to hide her burning cheeks. She can't believe he said that. At that moment, Masatsugu laughs softly, and the girl thinks he is enjoying her embarrassment. She suddenly freezes and asks what he means. Her gaze turns incredulous. The guy clarifies that he is talking about Lucy's trip to her homeland. Masatsugu says he always enjoys traveling as long as it doesn't cost a lot of money. That's what he's been waiting for. He looks at the girl and asks what's wrong with her. He assumes she's just tired. Lucy cautiously suggests that they visit her parents first. She says she has to tell them about the amazing man who takes care of her. The guy asks if they're talking about graves. Then he seriously says he'll go with her. He likes to change his surroundings, and he wants the girl to be his guide. The next morning, everyone gathers on a cliff ledge. They watch in silence as the battle unfolds in the distance. Lucy spots an army of goblins and reports that the enemy is approaching. Aaron looks on in shock and asks if this is really a procession of goblins. Lucy confirms her words. Masatsugu looks at his students and notices their tension. He expected them to be worried. He decides to find out how the alliance will behave. He ponders thoughtfully whether the allies are really going to stop the goblins before they reach the walls. The boy smiles wryly, as the walls were only a few steps behind them. At this time, Aaron points forward and says that the goblins suddenly stopped. Masatsugu watches intently as the horde freezes in place. At that moment, he realizes that the orders are probably being given to them by the Goblin King himself. He is happy to think that the alliance will easily act as a decoy. But then he thinks that it is not only the students who are under its protection. The boy realizes that this applies to him as well. He remembers how he was called into this world and how something led him to the shelter of the moon to stop the catastrophe. However, he stops his thoughts and turns to the girls. He asks if they understand what needs to be done. Aaron confidently says he knows everything. Lucy adds that she has practiced hundreds of times, so she is also confident in her abilities. Shichan smiles and says that he will do anything to save Masatsuga and the others. Masatsugu responds with a smile and says it's time to act. They join forces to complete the mission. The boy is about to explain the plan before the goblins arrive, when Lucy reminds him that she is half beast, so she can fight. Aaron seriously says that although he has no combat experience, he has courage, and that should be enough. Shichan closes her eyes and admits that she can only support because she is incapable of harming. Masatsugu looks at the girls and realizes that they misunderstood him completely. He says they won't have to fight. Shichan asks in surprise what she should do then, and suddenly throws herself on his neck, declaring that she will protect him. The guy coldly jokes that he might even feed her to the goblins. She grabs his shoulder and asks him to think about his words because she's scared. Then he clarifies that she will be tasked with logistical support. Masatsugu says that Aaron also has a hidden talent, and she can organize the financial support for the operation. The girl blushes, smiles, and agrees to become the coordinator. The guy looks at them seriously and asks if they understand everything. He warns them that if they follow the plan correctly, they won't have any difficulties. He begins to explain in detail the actions during the battle. Shichan, blushing, happily declares that their squad is ready and asks Masatsuga to watch her, showing off her own magical abilities. Aaron looks at his friend and says he will enhance her magic with his own spell. Masatsugu watches Shichan closely and thinks he has never seen such magic before. He was relieved that the girl finally understood the seriousness of the situation, because he did not like her senseless antics at such a critical moment. Shichan raised her hands to the sky and called for rain, and suddenly drops of water appeared around her. Masatsugu looked at her in disbelief, not understanding what was happening. The girl uttered a bizarre spell, and at the same moment the boy drew his sword, glared at her, and declared that he would hand her over to the goblins. Aaron rushed to stop him. The girl, with a burning blush, exclaimed that Shichan's magic was still improving, assuring that in fact her power was extremely powerful, and the boy should be patient. Masatsugu knew she was right, for her chant was so complex that even he, an expert in sorcery, could not fathom its structure and hidden power. Her words, intonation, and movements merged together, creating a perfect harmony that was difficult for even the most experienced magician to recreate. Masatsugu looked at her grimly, thinking she looked like a clown, while Aaron watched the girl in admiration, as if she had witnessed a true miracle. Suddenly, the sky thickened and rain poured down. Shichan pointed her finger down, and the rain fell directly on the goblin ranks. The goblins stirred, irritated by the unexpected downpour, and Shichan naively declared that it must have been too hot for them. The boy tried to stop her in an irritated manner. He sternly reminded her that he had asked her to pour hot water on her enemies, not to change the weather and make hot rain fall from the sky. The girl blinked her eyes in confusion and, not fully understanding, asked again if he really said that. She clearly didn't understand his instructions. Masatsugu realized that this would not change the outcome, but he knew full well that creating hot water and controlling the weather were completely different arts. The boy looked at her grimly and admitted that she was a true water goddess. The girl seriously confirmed this, and he apologized for everything he had said. He decided to treat her with respect. Shichun covered her mouth with her hands and asked in admiration if he would really treat her differently from now on. Masatsugu smiled and said that from now on he would call her Kazan. The girl exclaimed indignantly that it was a terrible name, since he had just promised respect. Here, Lucy attracted the attention of the host and reported that the goblins had moved forward. The goblins did not understand the reasons for the rain, and one of them ordered the king to be guarded, deciding that the humans had launched an attack. The entire horde huddled together, forming a tight defense around their ruler, and rushed towards him with furious speed. Aaron looked at Masatsugu with a smile, saying that his plan was working. The boy replied that now they would be able to find the king. Masatsugu smiled contentedly and decided to move on to the next stage. He gave the order to Lucy. The girl closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and confidently said she would make it. She smelled the scents and reported that there were about 100 goblins ahead. Using the method of elimination, she began to distinguish between similar smells in order to distinguish a special one among them, and this was how she intended to find the king. Suddenly, Lucy shouted that she had found him and pointed to a black goblin in the crowd. The black goblin turned and grinned menacingly. Masatsugu noted that he was skillfully camouflaged among the others, but his gigantic stature still gave him away. The Goblin King met Masatsugu's gaze and smiled faintly. The boy was surprised that Masatsugu had sensed his presence and thought that the ability to recognize an enemy was not unique to him. The boy turned sharply to Aaron. She replied that it was time to demonstrate her magic. Masatsugu rose into the air, examined his body, and was about to turn around when he heard Lucy call out to him. The girl said she didn't believe he had been defeated, but she begged him to come back alive and unharmed. She wanted to say something more, but she stopped when he gently patted her head and asked her not to waste words on it. She tried to speak again, but the boy interrupted her, saying that she shouldn't worry, because even the goblins had taught him how to properly activate the defensive skill. Aaron looked at him and asked if he was confident in his abilities. Masatsugu turned around and confidently replied that it was time to act. Aaron exclaims that she will send him to the Goblin King with her magic. She reaches out to the boy and lifts him into the air. Masatsugu looks down at himself and notices that his body is glowing. He realizes that he can now reach the Goblin King in one leap. Aaron, blushing, looks at the boy and exclaims something. Masatsugu looks back and asks what happened, but because of the strong wind, he cannot hear the girl's words. He only guesses that she is trying to tell him something inspiring before the battle. Closing his eyes and smiling, Masatsugu lunges forward. Drawing his sword from its scabbard, he tells the girls not to worry about him. Masatsugu smiles, confident that he won't lose. At that moment, a strong gust of wind kicks up dust, and the girls cover themselves with their hands. Aaron looks at the spot where the boy was standing and realizes that he is gone. She shouts something, but the words are lost. Lucy comes over and asks what happened. Aaron points out that the boy's pants are torn, and all the girls freeze in surprise. Masatsugu's strategy begins to take effect. At this time, the dark-haired boy wonders what is happening on the battlefield. He is told that the goblins have stopped. He chuckles thoughtfully, assuming that they are afraid of the heroes from another world. The guildmaster tries to stop the heroes, urging them not to take any rash steps. He is told not to worry. The man angrily asks if they know who he is. The dark-haired young man smiles broadly and announces that the time has come for his grand debut. At this time, the Goblin King calmly surveys the battlefield. One of the goblins asks him what he has to say. The Goblin King suddenly opens his eyes, noticing something unusual in the sky, and orders everyone to fall to the ground. Masatsugu bursts into their army. All the goblins fall to their faces, and the king himself is covered by a stone slab. He stands up and approaches Masatsugu. The Goblin King realizes that it was this boy who defeated part of his army. He asks how he dares to do this to his family and calls the boy arrogant. Masatsugu stands up and, smiling, declares that all obstacles have been removed. He demands to fight the Goblin King one-on-one. The Goblin King smiles wryly and says that's why you shouldn't be so arrogant. Raising his hammer, he contemptuously insults Masatsugu, calling him weak, and proclaims himself the king of terror and fear who will not forgive the perpetrator. Masatsugu watches as the king swings his hammer, thunders threats, and with a blow causes the ground to tremble and collapse. A strong gust of wind raises clouds of dust, and the girls can't see anything. The Goblin King turns around, smiling, and says that Masatsugu is just an ordinary human, worthy of shame in a fight with him. But Masatsugu, standing under the hammer blow, agrees that it is truly a pitiful trifle. The king watches in amazement as the boy rises and, clutching the hammer with one finger, says that he forced him to use only it. Masatsugu raises his weapon and asks if this is all the king is capable of. The king asks why the boy doesn't attack. Masatsugu, with a gloomy look, admits that he has often wondered how strong the Goblin King is. He throws the hammer away with one finger. The Goblin King explodes in rage, accusing the boy of impudence and assuring him that he will regret it. Masatsugu interrupts him, saying that now the king will have to defend himself. The king looks at him in surprise. Masatsugu strikes with his sword, then leaps up and kicks. The king flies away, his back hitting the stone. Raising his head, Masatsugu declares that anyone who touches the moon's shelter will receive the same punishment. The boy approaches the Goblin King and coldly says that their battle is over, but is surprised to notice a slight smile on his enemy's face. Suddenly, the goblin jumps back sharply, raises his hand up and prays to a higher being to grant him strength. Masatsugu doesn't understand who the enemy is addressing, but an anxious foreboding tightens in his chest. The goblin's eyes widen and a black cloud forms over Masatsugu, shooting a beam straight at the king, kicking up dust. The goblin rises again and, choking with delight, rejoices in the terrible power he has received, although his body begins to convulse. Masatsugu watches in horror as the Goblin King transforms into a huge, hideous monster. A roar erupts from his mouth, and he opens his mouth wide as if ready to swallow his own warriors. Masatsugu looks at the monster with disgust and is surprised that it no longer recognizes its people. The monster responds with malicious words. He mockingly asks if the goblin monster has truly forgotten the king's own pride. Roaring, the monster promises to crush him and rushes forward, trying to pierce the boy's body. But Masatsugu manages to dodge. He watches carefully and realizes that each tentacle of the monster is moving individually, as if it has lost control. The monster roars again and strikes with its appendages, and the boy, while running away, suddenly stumbles and falls. Standing up, he glares at the monster and thinks about what to do next, but it menacingly exclaims that it is his end. Masatsugu just smiles as he jumps up. The monster roars in surprise, its eyes widening in surprise. The guy jumps back and says that the attacks are too predictable, and the monster itself is not even able to control its own limbs. The tentacles begin to tangle and devour his own body. He howls and writhes, while Masatsugu calmly watches. He mentally notes that even the tentacles are fighting against each other. Masatsugu scornfully says that the end has come for the Goblin King, and asks if only dark sorcery is keeping the enemy alive. The monster roars and writhes, and the boy asks why it doesn't surrender, since it has long since strayed from the path of a true king. He calls it a curse and decides to put an end to it. Masatsugu pulls out his sword and says that it was the Goblin King who first made him take out this weapon. The boy places the sword in front of him, thinking that one strike will be enough, even if he is holding back most of his strength. He decides to end it all with one single blow and leaps, preparing to pierce the enemy. At that moment, the Monster King looks at the boy and asks who he really is. Masatsugu realizes that he has momentarily regained consciousness. One of the tentacles swings, but Masatsugu dodges. He remembers that he already called himself the head of the shelter. The monster does not believe it and considers it a mockery, because he cannot accept that he was defeated by a simple teacher. Masatsugu says his true strength is his ability to protect his family, and when he protects orphans, he awakens an infinite power within him. He runs his sword through the king and shouts that anyone who touches the shelter will be destroyed. After a few more hits, the monster's body flies away, shattering the rocks. The guy looks around and notices with surprise that he had completely forgotten about the mountain behind him. The terrain has radically changed. Masatsugu looks into the distance and concludes that the battle between the goblin army and the kingdom is still ongoing. At this moment, the dark-haired boy loudly exclaims that people are not afraid to fight goblins. His voice makes those around him turn around. But when the goblins look directly at him, he gets scared and, trembling, starts threatening, trying to scare them. However, the goblins rush at him with a scream, causing him to scream in fear. The girl manages to cover him with her body and asks if he is injured. The boy, smiling defiantly, replies that the girl shouldn't worry, because he is the bearer of the sacred sword. He takes a sharp swing and accidentally pierces one of the goblins, looks at him and claims that it was not easy for him. The girl anxiously reminds them that there are too many enemies, but the boy assures them that their strength has diminished, and it is time to look for the Goblin King. He points to one of the fattened goblins and proclaims that he is the king, his aura supposedly different from the others. His companions encourage him, and then he solemnly draws his sword, ordering the goblin to prepare for battle. Masatsugu watches intently from the sidelines and realizes that Miyamoto is at least trying to keep the situation under control. The guy thinks that the country's salvation was just a coincidence, and notices that the Goblin King's body has disappeared, which he is very happy about, because he doesn't want to attract too much attention. He decides to return to the girls and is glad that the battle for the orphanage ended without major consequences. And now they are all finally going to go home, leaving the chaos behind. Lucy and Masatsugu are walking to the market when she suddenly stops, happily calls out to him, and tells him that the price of potatoes has dropped. He replies that he should buy more. Masatsugu wonders if it wouldn't be better to grow potatoes in his own garden to have them as both food and seeds. While he's shopping, Lucy sees children shouting about the arrival of the hero. They raise their heads and the girl asks in surprise what Miyamoto is doing here. A huge crowd gathered to greet the hero, who rode on horseback and waved his hand. People thanked him for his rescue, and Miyamoto beamed with joy. Masatsugu mentally notes that this man could easily throw a big parade. But he wonders what a real goblin king and a crazed goblin would say about him. He hears a villager claim that the power of their hero and his weapon is unfathomable. Another villager relays a rumor that he defeated the king with a single blow. Another resident asks if this is the moment when Miyamoto hit the king at the gate, and adds that it was an impressive sight. Lucy suddenly blushes and loudly denies it, claiming that it was actually Masatsugu who defeated the Goblin King in the Nairia Valley. People turn around in surprise and ask what she means. They are curious about who this girl is. Masatsugu takes Lucy by the hand and takes her aside, telling her to be quiet. The girl tries to resist, but it's in vain. She looks at him and doesn't understand. Once they reach the forest, Masatsugu sternly demands that she stop shouting such things. Lucy, confused and offended, blushes and asks why he doesn't want to tell the truth. Because the false heroes will take his credit. She looks down gloomily and remembers Doran's words that she should tell the truth, otherwise their attitude will forever remain humiliating. Masatsugu, without looking back, says that he doesn't need fame, and lets the girl do as she pleases, because he himself doesn't aspire to be a hero. He adds that his dream is only for a peaceful and calm life, without bloody battles and unnecessary glory. The girl stops and stares at him, trying to say something, but he interrupts and reminds her that she has to finish working on the paper sample by the end of the day. She just smiles and agrees. Lucy happily runs up and says that Aaron will definitely arrive on time, but suddenly stops when another girl approaches them. Masatsugu immediately recognizes Ruby. She bows, and he realizes that she has come to recruit him into the guild. Ruby smiles and assures me that this is not what she came for at all. She says she will come back if she has time. She remembers Doran's words that their country's hero will not be ignored. Her stubborn father admires Masatsugu, and so does she. The boy only grumbles that she is terrible. He turns away and orders the girl to go home. He says that he is completely busy with the shelter and that if she interferes, he will show no mercy. Ruby smiles even wider, surprised by his stubbornness. She replies that she won't back down either. The girl adds that the guild won't give up either. The guy curses, and she reminds him that all the leaders saw his fight with the Goblin King through the magical ability of remote viewing. Masatsugu was certain that the battle had passed without witnesses. Ruby sighs and says that he easily defeated the Goblin King and believes that he has enough strength to destroy even a magic sword. The boy realizes that his plan to stay in the shadows has failed. He rages and curses his own stupidity. Ruby suddenly hugs Lucy and asks if she has anything to say. The girl just giggles awkwardly. Lucy asks the owner to stay with them. Masatsugu replies that he has nowhere to go. Ruby laughs. That's exactly what she was hoping for. Lucy begs the boy to be more patient and not rush things. He says he doesn't care how many times Ruby comes, but orders her to go. She replies that she likes his character. Ruby leaves. Lucy waves after her and promises to wait. Masatsugu sighs heavily, admitting that this girl has exhausted him considerably. Aaron returns with the paper samples. Lucy says she went to the market to get them this morning while she was sleeping. She timidly asks if it really matters. Aaron shows off his homemade sheets. Most of them are tearing, too fragile to write on. Masatsugu sees that the quality is terrible. But still, he understands that you can write on this paper. After all, it was made from weeds from the garden, so even a child could handle it. Aaron blushes when he says that paper has only minimal properties. However, he reports that she has passed the test. The girl is beaming with happiness. Lucy is delighted and says it's wonderful. Aaron adds that for the first time, a book that was only available to the royal family will be available to the common people. Masatsugu decides that they will sell the books on behalf of Moonshelter. This will be their second product. Suddenly, everyone hears a strange sound. Masatsugu, Aaron, and Lucy head out to investigate the source. They see Shi-Chen smiling and wishing everyone good morning. The guy asks what happened. She replies that she has been practicing magic. Masatsugu asks her to practice outside. The girl says that then she won't be able to find time for tea. The guy is angry. Did she really eat everything? She admits that she did. An argument begins to spark between them. At this moment, a girl enters the shelter looking for Masatsugu to arrest him. She asks loudly if Naomi Masatsugu is here. He stands calmly in the doorway, arms crossed, and says that she is trespassing and should have warned him. There is an awkward silence, and the stranger understands the situation. She admits he is right, then suddenly bows, surprising Masatsugu, and apologizes sincerely. The boy is confused and doesn't understand what's wrong with her. He notices her badge and suspects that she's an inspector from the Royal Child Protection Service. But suddenly, she points a sword in his face and shouts that it's definitely Naomi Masatsugu. She shouts that he is suspected of child abuse and orders him to surrender without resistance. Masatsugu doesn't understand what she's talking about. When he gets angry, she screams even louder. She proudly declares that her name is beautiful, Rimal. In response, the guy calls her a hot-tempered woman right to her face. She screamed in rage, emphasizing that she had already told him not to call her a woman. Her name was Eustace Rimal, and demanded that he pronounce it correctly. Naomi Masatsugu scowled and asked her to keep her distance. At that moment, another girl intervened between them, pushed forward and said that they were too close, pushing Eustace back. Masatsugu wondered in surprise if she really thought he was going to attack her. He wasn't so hot-tempered as to raise his sword without reason. He added that they would not be able to continue in this spirit, and, addressing her as a woman, told her to go back to where she came from, after which he called her by name. She took another step back and replied with satisfaction that it was as it should be. The other girls watched with curiosity, but Masatsugu only became more confused. Eustacia said that the very fact that he called her by her name was an acknowledgement of her justice. Naomi Masatsugu called it nonsense. One of the girls asked if there was a reason why he didn't call her by her first name right away. The other replied that to her she was just like everyone else. Naomi had already turned to Eustace directly and asked if she really meant a joke. She denied that she was doing such a thing and was keeping the secret tightly. Suddenly, she pointed her sword at him again and shouted that he was suspected of child abuse. She declared that he should be arrested immediately and the orphans should be transferred to shelters and foster families. Naomi replied that she did not know what the laws were in that country, but he would never confess to a crime he had not committed. He felt that she was incapable of speaking without a sword in her hand. She continued to scream, and he coldly replied that she should consider him innocent. He asked what evidence they had to immediately brand him a criminal. The girls began to gather around. Eustacia stated that they have the testimony of an informant. Or rather, Prime Minister Fortissimo himself personally arrived at the castle and ordered the authorities to act. Naomi wondered if a hideout under the castle itself would arouse suspicion among the higher-ups. He didn't understand why they were so concerned about it. Eustace added that according to the information, he did something inappropriate with these three girls. Masatsugu's face twisted in fury and disbelief. He repeated her words, not believing she was serious. She confirmed it. He asked if she really thought he was delusional. The girls came to his defense. One exclaimed that the master had never touched them, even when they slept in the same bed. He was a true gentleman. Stunned, Eustace asked if they really slept in the same bed. Masatsugu shouted that there was a reason. The others explained that it was true, but the master took care of them. She doubted if it was true. One girl said she couldn't sleep otherwise because he had taken her most precious thing, a self-defense knife. Eustace immediately asked if he had really taken her treasure, and Masatsugu shouted that she had misunderstood. Shia added that she didn't believe such accusations because they only talked about how they wanted to have 10 children, and even picked out names. Eustace asked in horror if it was really 10. Masatsugu shouted that she had twisted everything. She reached out to Shay, saying that they were almost the same age, so she understood her interest in a relationship, but planning such a large family was too much. She stated that more is always better. Masatsugu exploded, declaring that if Shia said anything else to tarnish his reputation, she wouldn't let it go this time. He emphasized that he would never have a relationship with this self-proclaimed goddess of poverty. She cried and said it was terrible because they had even made up names for the children. He shouted again that it wasn't him, she had made it up herself. Now Masatsugu spoke coldly and firmly, declaring that the story was too stupid for anyone to believe. Eustace said that made her even more suspicious of him. She admitted that he was right, because it all sounded like empty words. Masatsugu asked her to say directly what she had in mind. She adjusted her glasses and declared that she would stay in the moon shelter herself to see the truth with her own eyes. Naomi asked in surprise if she was really going to live in their shelter. She answered in the affirmative, because she wanted to constantly monitor him to make sure he didn't do anything strange. She shook the girls' hands and assured them not to worry. One said it was wonderful and promised to prepare a room for her. Eustace was touched by their kindness and thanked them. Naomi abruptly stated that he didn't give permission, but Aaron said it was better to see everything with her own eyes. The other added that then all suspicions would quickly dissipate, since he would still be homeless. Masatsugu thought to himself that she didn't understand how burdensome it was for him, but in the end, he gave in and agreed. Eustacia Ramal is beaming with joy, but Naomi Masatsugu thunders that there are rules here, and if she doesn't follow them, she will have to leave. She turns to him, offended, and asks him to repeat what he said. He strictly says that breakfast is at 7:30, just try to sleep in. Lunch is at 1, a snack at 3, and dinner is at 6, so let him remember that 3 meals a day are the key to health. He adds that no one will get up from the table until all the dishes are washed. And you should go to bed no later than 9 o'clock at night, otherwise she will never grow up. Eustacia Ramal smiles uncertainly, and he looks at her suspiciously, asking if she said something funny. Then he reassures her. Don't worry, because he's cooking the food himself, and he doesn't care if it's for 4 or 5 girls. She tries to say something but covers her mouth and, having disappeared, only blushes and smiles. Finally, she says that she is now under his care. Naomi Masatsugu looks on in surprise and confusion as the girls call Eustace to show her the room. He thinks he's even relieved to some extent, because he'll never get rich here because he doesn't have a job. He wonders how long it would take for a high-class person to ruin such a miserable life. He just sighs heavily as he watches the girls go on a tour of the house. But suddenly, Eustacia Ramal explodes with accusations that he is not only a child molester but also a swindler. Holding a cup, she shouts that giving people such a filthy drink is pure robbery. Naomi asks him not to ruin his reputation, and explains that it is a drink from his country called coffee. She sniffs cautiously and admits that it smells good, and he mentions that it is roasted beans found in the mountains. She insists on checking to see if it's safe to drink. He lets her try it, and is surprised by her unexpected calm. She solemnly says that the master must be delighted because she is willing to sacrifice her life testing his poison. Naomi shouts that this is not so, and he adds that as punishment for distorting his image, there will only be vegetables for dinner today. Shia asks confusedly how extra vegetables can be a punishment. Naomi brushes it off. That's how it will be. If he's already trying the drink, he better do it quickly, because he doesn't want to be late for the day of the new product presentation. Eustace raises her cup and shouts for everyone to take a good look. If she gets sick after a sip, then she can forget about selling coffee. She drinks and immediately spits it all out in Naomi's face, screaming that it's hot. He rages, calling her stupid, and she awkwardly apologizes. Naomi wipes her face and says that only a foolish person would take a big gulp of an unknown drink. Eustace awkwardly admits that she didn't expect it to be so bitter. The girl gently tells Makun that she has finished wiping his face. It would be terrible if he got burned. So let him rest, resting his head on her lap. Naomi ignores her and asks the others what they think of the coffee. One replies that the taste is unusual but pleasant. Shia says she liked it too. It's easy to drink and leaves a pleasant aftertaste. Eustace asks if they don't feel worse sometimes. She hears in response that they are fine and that this is to be expected, because the host is a good cook. Another girl confirms that even though he is an oddball, he is a wonderful cook. Naomi warns them not to relax or drink too much, or they won't sleep. The 3 girls immediately yawn obediently. Eustace asks excitedly if he's burned. He replies that nothing of the sort has happened. She bows and says she's still terribly sorry. He asks her to stop exaggerating. She asks if he's angry. He assures her that he's not, even though she'll be punished for wasting food. Eustace freezes awkwardly, and he gets to the point. Today is the day they're introducing a new product at the coffee shop, so they should start preparing immediately. Everyone gets to work together. Naomi looks at the table, knocked together from scrap boards, and admits that it turned out surprisingly decent. The girls come up and say they've changed. There's a whole line of them in maid costumes in front of him. Shia exclaims enthusiastically that the uniform is so cute, it's a dream to work in. Naomi explains that he got the idea from the aprons they made earlier. The girls are surprised because they didn't know that. Erin, blushing embarrassedly, says that such dresses don't suit her at all. The other girl enthusiastically denies it and asks Naomi if he thinks Erin is cute. He replies that of course he does, because he made the dress himself, so it must fit well. Erin blushes again, admitting that this is the first time he called her cute and that he didn't want to hug her before. Naomi indignantly says that girls like to exaggerate everything. Then he turns to the 3rd one and asks how it happened that her outfit showed off so much more than intended. She makes excuses that it's her waist that's to blame. She boldly says that she would like to conquer him more easily with her beauty, so she herself cut the dress at the waist. Naomi angrily replies that with such actions she will someday turn into a wild animal. She shouts indignantly that this will never happen. Eustacia Ramal comes out in a modestly closed dress and asks with uncertainty whether she will really have to wear such an outfit too. Naomi Masatsubu smiles and says that if she doesn't like it, she can stay at the shelter. With this attitude towards visitors, she will only be a nuisance. The girl hastily promises that she will try to control herself. She points her fingers at him and exclaims that if there's a chance he's causing the kids too much stress, then they'll live together. Otherwise, it'll be bad if she doesn't help at all. With a sly smile, she adds that, of course, she will treat her customers the best she can. Naomi suspiciously asks if she is going to kill them. He asks her to smile more naturally, like she used to, because even when she didn't smile, it looked better. She is embarrassed, blushes, and asks if that is really true. Then she mumbles that such cute dresses don't suit her. He sharply calls her a fool, because that suits him better, and no one would ever say that about her. She quietly agrees. Eustacia Ramal remarks with admiration that Naomi's apron fits him surprisingly well, which completely confuses him. The other girls unanimously support her words. Naomi says angrily that it's not the point, because the preparations are already running late. We need to get together immediately. Eustacia confirms that he's right. The girls tidy up and tidy themselves up. Naomi Masatsugu solemnly announces that the world's first Café Luna opens today. In the hall, a customer tries the drink and says with surprise that it is bitter, calling Naomi a brother. The man adds that he will probably get used to the taste and asks if he really came from another country. Naomi replies that yes, his homeland is called Ethiopia. Another visitor is surprised, because he has never heard of such a thing. Naomi explains that it is a country across the sea, far to the west. The guest is surprised by the rarity of the drink, and Naomi mentally admits that in reality he is from another world altogether, and the story about abroad was just made up to attract more customers. At this time, Lucy happily turns to her visiting grandfather, asking if he really took a moment to visit them. She smiles broadly and says she can't even believe it, but sincerely thanks him for the visit. The other men notice that Aaron is acting very different today than usual. One of them offers to order 100 cups at once if it will help her. Aaron is outraged and shouts that these brats have appeared here again. She exclaims that they are only scaring her and that they should leave the establishment alone after drinking 1 cup each. They mockingly ask if they can have a whole teapot instead of a cup. One boy approaches Shia, asking if she is doing well today. She sharply calls them little, because how can you address a goddess who is older than them like that, and demands to be called Shisan. They shout in unison that they will never do this. Shia is furious, and Naomi is confused about who this is. But if they pay, then it's okay. He adds milk for the little ones. Naomi approaches Eustacia and asks why. Seeing her idol, she stands aside with a tray, doing nothing. She calmly replies that no one comes to place an order. Naomi sharply says that's what will happen if she looks at everyone so harshly. He asks where her smile and friendliness went. She admits that she used to practice a little, but now she can't anymore. Naomi tells her to leave the exercises for another time, and advises her to approach the customers herself to take orders. Eustacia admits that he is right and promises to do just that. Naomi, watching her, worries if everything will go well. She approaches the old man and says in a cold voice that she is ready to listen to his order. He shudders and says in fear that she scared him. Eustace sharply demands that he quickly name a dish or drink that he likes. The old man apologizes in embarrassment and orders a new product, coffee. She coldly confirms his words and says that there is no mistake. He sighs heavily, but she explains that she only meant that his pronunciation was correct. Her time is limited, so let him answer clearly, yes or no. The old man apologizes again, and Eustacia says it's unnecessary, as she understands his wishes. She tells him to wait a moment and abruptly turns to Naomi Masatsugu. Pointing her finger at him, she loudly announces that this man has ordered coffee, so he should make it immediately. Naomi quickly grabs her hand and pulls her aside. She doesn't understand and asks what's going on, if there's a problem. Naomi replies that there is no problem, because this man is their client and pays the money. He just wanted her to speak to him more politely. She insists that she made his intentions clear, explaining everything rationally. Naomi Musatsugu indignantly asks if she really interrogates clients, as such behavior is inappropriate. Someone nearby asks him not to look down on him. Eustacia Ramel coldly says that this was not an interrogation, because a real criminal would not have been able to withstand such pressure. Naomi shouts that she should perform the duties of a waitress. He sternly declares that he will talk to her later, and then approaches the old man and sincerely apologizes for their waitress's rudeness. The old man gently replies that it is not worth worrying about. The old man curiously asks what the girl's name is. Naomi awkwardly replies that her name is Eustacia Rymel, and apologizes once again for her behavior. But the old man suddenly says with burning eyes that it was wonderful. He liked it more than he could have expected. He admits that it was the first time he had felt such powerful pressure from customer service. Her words awakened a strange but unforgettable feeling in him. The old man happily announces that he will come again the next day, and asks to be treated even more harshly. Eustacia seriously assures him that it will be so. Naomi is confused and thinks that the world has gone crazy, because there are only weird people around. The girls approach him, and for a moment he is glad that at least they are behaving properly. Seeing Lucia and Shia, he asks what's wrong with them. They hug him tightly and enthusiastically tell him that Leolia really loves him, even though she pretends not to. Naomi finally realizes what has happened. They are under the influence of caffeine. For those who are not sensitive to it, it feels like a strange relaxation or intoxication. He asks if they are really drunk from the coffee. Lucia whispers dreamily that she wants him to touch her ears at night, and confess that he always wants to see her by his side. Aaron, in turn, says that he dreams of hearing from him the words that she is the only princess, and that even in everyday things he treats her with tenderness. At this time, the old man watches with delight as the director of the orphanage seems to scold little Lucia. He finds it even more interesting. Naomi shouts that everyone has misunderstood everything. Eustacia abruptly intervenes and asks if it is appropriate to call customers you. Naomi wonders why she has suddenly regained her sanity. She approaches him and says that Messiah is tired, so her attractive forms will help him relax. Naomi shouts in panic that this will not happen. He shouts that the cafe is closing, and as an excuse he makes up that they have run out of coffee beans. One of the visitors menacingly demands to explain whether he did anything suspicious with Lucia. Others support him, and someone jokes that they should play catch-up after work. The old man asks to scold him again tomorrow. All the guests leave. Eustacia thoughtfully says that we can use the strange effect of coffee on children to study its effects. Lucia, clutching Naomi's neck, tries to kiss him. He, confused, asks Eustacia to help pull them away from him. A little later, Lucia says, embarrassed, that she feels like she said something terrible, but she doesn't remember anything. Aaron agrees that the last thing she remembers is the opening of the coffee shop. Naomi sternly tells them to forget everything and stop drinking coffee. The girls look at him in surprise, as if they don't understand the reason. He sighs and says he is still terribly tired. He suggests they go to the bathroom early that evening. The girls agree. Naomi turns to Shia, asking if she's going to take a shower too. She cryptically says it's time to reveal the secret. Smiling happily, she announces that her sister has found a hot spring nearby. This discovery confirms that she is the true spirit of hot springs. At the hot springs, the girls are asked why they disappear from time to time. It turns out that this is exactly why. Shia shyly asks Naomi if he's angry, saying she did something unnecessary. He admits in his mind that he likes swimming, so it's a pleasant surprise. He thinks that if he had been more open back then at school, maybe he wouldn't have become an outcast. The thought weighs on him as he dives into the water. Naomi gently strokes Shay's head, causing her eyes to widen in surprise. He worries if he's done everything right. But Shia suddenly bursts into joy, shouting that Makun has finally fallen in love with her. She promises never to wash her hair again. She proudly announces that this day will go down in history as the day Makun patted her on the head. All the gods must know about it. Naomi feels humiliated and indignantly asks if she really wants to embarrass him in front of the whole world. Someone cleared their throat and cautiously asked permission to address, creating a sense of formality in this absurd situation. Eustacia Ramal asked in surprise if they were really going to swim together. Naomi replied that they were, and asked if there was anything wrong with that. She screamed sharply, declaring that the birds were flying and that something was clearly wrong. Grabbing the rope, she declared it a crime and promised to arrest him on the spot. Naomi shouted in anger, calling her stupid, and explained that he was not going to do anything with these children, because they themselves asked for help with the washing. She didn't believe him, shouting that he shouldn't pretend to be innocent. He replied that she was the one forcing him to justify himself. He emphasized again that he had no intentions, just a simple baptism, and asked how she even intended to convict him of a crime. She calmly declared that she would go with them. Eustacia boldly declared that she would then be able to catch him red-handed and protect the children at the same time, two things at one stroke. She ordered everyone to head to the spring immediately and began to take off their clothes. Naomi shouted at her not to do it right there. Inside, she undressed shamelessly to the song, and Eustace, looking embarrassed, admitted that her appearance was truly striking. Shay laughed and asked with a flirtatious smile if that was true. Aaron enthusiastically confirmed and Lucia nodded approvingly. Eustacia joined the girls and asked Shay how she managed to achieve such a figure. She said seriously to listen carefully and began to explain. At that time, Naomi was enjoying a bath in the hot spring, thinking that bathing was good for the body and spirit. Hearing the voices, he turned and said that the place was truly wonderful. The girls in towels joined in. Shay got in the water and exclaimed that it was hot. Eustace checked and said that although it was hot, the temperature was pleasant. Naomi asked what they were arguing about so heatedly. Eustacia replied openly that they were discussing the size of women's forms. He asked, confused, if she meant her own forms. She calmly explained that she was referring to Shia's body. Naomi exclaimed angrily that that wasn't what he was talking about at all, and he didn't care who it was. But why was she so enthusiastically discussing all this? Eustacia objected loudly, explaining that large breasts were necessary for nursing children, and it was perfectly normal to want to know such things. Naomi didn't understand what she was getting at. Lucia said awkwardly that they just thought he liked big ones too. Aaron grumbled that she didn't care, but asked what size he preferred. Naomi indignantly declared that he didn't care, and why was there even this conversation about size? Eustacia sternly said that everything was obvious. She exclaimed that Shia herself admitted that her breasts had grown because she asked him to touch them every day. Naomi exploded in anger, shouting that he had had enough, and demanded that these fabrications stop immediately. He abruptly told Shia that maybe she should cut off that unnecessary fat so that all the nutrients could go back to her brain. She exclaimed indignantly that he was being too rude and might offend her sister. Naomi shrugged it off, saying it was none of his business, and moved the conversation onto something else, asking Eustacia how her investigation was progressing. He asked if she had caught him red-handed. She confidently replied that a criminal would not let himself be caught so easily. She stated that a detective's job was to get to the truth. Naomi skeptically wished her luck in investigating a non-existent crime. Eustace replied with a serious look that this was exactly what she was going to do, so she challenged him to a washing competition with her. There was a tense silence. Finally, Naomi coldly said that she was crossing all boundaries. She declared that as a detective, she would not allow him to commit any more crimes. They sat down opposite each other, and Eustace began to lather her sponge. Naomi asked grimly if she thought it strange that they were sitting so face to face. She exclaimed suspiciously that this was a cheap trick of his, as he was probably planning to stab her in the back and commit crimes against children. Naomi cried out in despair that she really thought he was a criminal genius. He asked what the point of this duel was and what exactly she was going to do. He was sure she was just trying to distract him, but she told him to be quiet and not to interrupt. She declares with a threatening face that he won't be able to do anything wrong while she's washing him, and he asks ironically what will happen if she finds his weak spot. She replies that it's not if, but that he will definitely find it, because he only thinks about how to escape from the watchful eye of the best detective in the Valhansum kingdoms, so that he can have fun with the girls later. Naomi Masatsugu asks if it's even normal that a woman who says things like that about girls is considered the best detective in the country, and she screams that this is too much and that she can't carry on with her nonsense. She offers him a fight. If he can do something bad while she's not watching, then he wins, and if she stops him, then she wins. Naomi asks why he should participate. Eustacia Rimal replies that it means he's scared, and then Naomi angrily asks what she just said, feeling his pride taken a hit. She defiantly throws out that he runs away with his tail up, and then he is not a man but a coward, and Naomi angrily asks if she really thinks he is so easy to provoke. He grabs a towel and yells that she has been teasing him for too long, so he accepts the challenge because the orphanage director will not run away when it comes to honor in front of the girls. Eustacia exclaims that this is wonderful and suggests they begin, her stone cracking in her hand, and it seems as if a bloody harvest is about to begin in these hot springs. Naomi screams that she has gone too far in her provocations, but accepts the challenge because neither of them is going to back down or give up. Aaron quietly remarks that Naomi is very easy to throw off balance, and Lucia laughs because Eustacia wanted so badly to just get him to agree to rub her back. When they start washing each other, Naomi is indignant that she immediately hits the most vulnerable spots, and Eustacia replies that he never relaxes and is always on the alert. She defiantly adds that no matter how he behaves, she won't take her eyes off him even for a moment, continuing to soap his body as if in a real interrogation. Suddenly, Naomi wonders if she takes care of her hair because it looks damaged, and she indignantly orders not to be distracted by such trifles. He says that the hair is too stiff even when wet, which means the cuticle is peeling, and Eustacia is surprised to admit that his words ring suspiciously true. She admits that she spends a lot of time taking care of it, and he asks if there's anything in her lifestyle that's too damaging to her hair. She says that it's the overheating from the sun that ruins it. She thinks and adds that she is outside during the day but also often sits indoors doing paperwork, but hair problems appear despite this. Suddenly she remembers that recently fire butterflies have been flying nearby, which she has helped tame more than once, and they could be the cause of the damage. She admits that this is the most likely cause of heat-induced cuticle weakening, and sadly adds that the damage to the hair is already too serious to ignore. Naomi reassures her, saying that it is only partially damaged, and explains that you can't just cut it off and forget about it. You need to use a special product on it after bathing. Shocked, she exclaims that she never thought such a thing existed, and when Naomi suggests she go get it in the locker room, she instantly runs there, thanks him, and says she owes him a favor. She shouts in confusion, Where is this remedy? And Naomi asks if she really can't find it, and she replies that she really can't see anything. He says it should be easy. She screams that she can't find it anywhere. Then Naomi splashes water from a bucket on her face and orders her to check all the shelves again, and Eustace says that it may have been stolen. Naomi, meanwhile, sits relaxed in the hot springs and says that the water is nice and warm, and a person cannot live on hard work alone. They need rest. He adds that such calmness is not exactly his style, but it is useful. And at that moment, Ustasha appears from behind with a menacing voice, sharply calling his name. She accuses him of trying to deceive her, but he just clicks his tongue and says that it's okay. She's already back from her search. She is outraged that he cleverly used the trap to distract the attentive inspector, and he replies that either way, she lost sight of him, so the victory is his. Eustacia acknowledges his victory and shouts that he really skillfully avoided the inspector's gaze and enjoyed himself with the girls. But Naomi says that if he is still being accused, then why does he need this victory? Lucia says she didn't want to interfere in their argument, but now it's over, and Naomi remarks that her observation was pointless, after which she apologizes. Lucia adds that she hesitated about whether he should give in to the girls a little, but couldn't bring herself to, and Naomi replies to the others that it's okay to be rude to this woman now. Someone shouts indignantly that he has no conscience, and Eustacia says that her sister would be very worried if he really did that to her. Aaron angrily says that he only touched, and if he wants to touch, he must first get permission. Shikaya shouts indignantly that his sister has indeed been touched, and that is now an undeniable fact. Naomi Masatsugu is surprised at why everyone is reacting this way, while Eustacia Ramal smiles mockingly and announces that it is time to arrest him. She abruptly snatches the rope and shouts that he is so safe that he touched it right in front of the inspector. In accordance with the decision of the Court of the Kingdom of Walsum, Eustacia Ramal places him under arrest. But then Lucia abruptly exclaims that her master would never do such a thing. He calls her name, and she suddenly realizes that perhaps he has changed his mind. For her, this is the chance of a lifetime. She stands up abruptly and tells Naomi Masatsuga to touch her wherever he wants. He, having lost all emotion, only replies dryly to calm her down. But suddenly Aaron screams in horror that it happened again. Shea adds that this time it was the legs. Eustacia sternly declares that to do such abominations just while talking to her is a crime worthy of the death penalty. Naomi screams that this is not true, he didn't even touch her. Then Eustace sharply asks, if not him, then who is to blame? And it is at this moment that the water around him begins to gurgle, creating waves. A giant squid emerges from the depths, towering before them. Eustacia Ramal exclaims in astonishment that it is the Squid King himself, the second most powerful. But in reality, they are faced with a creature that all sailors in the world fear, the Lord of the Oceans, and the eternal enemy of sailors. From the darkness of the abyss, it spews clouds of ink and disappears, which is why it is called the Sea Synthopper. Naomi Masatsugu asks incredulously if it is really not an ordinary squid. The squid attacks Naomi Masatsuga with a vengeance, and he realizes that the situation is critical. But at that moment, Eustacia Ramal steps forward, raising her hands and summoning an all-encompassing astral force. Weapons form in her palms, and she shouts out a challenge to the monster, assuring him that whether there are 10 or 100 tentacles, not one of them will pass the one named Eustacia Ramal. She engages in battle, and Naomi Masatsugu is surprised to say that he thought it was just a sword. Eustacia turns around and explains that he is mistaken. In the House of Ramal, only those who bear the name Eustacia are allowed to carry the sacred shield. Naomi Masatsugu, confused, remarks that she doesn't understand whether it's a sword or a shield. She seriously replies that it's the biggest taboo in the Rimal family, and her aunt severely punishes anyone who even dares to mention it. He sighs, saying that it's really not easy. Then she adds with a smile that she still has incredible strength, and he hopes that thanks to her he will be able to save Lucia. But Eustace sadly says that this is impossible. Naomi doesn't understand, but she explains that she can only use this power once a day, and now she has to wait a whole day. He asks irritably if, after all her big words, that's really all she can do. Meanwhile, tentacles grab Aaron and Shay, ripping off their towels, and soon Lucia is also captured. Shikaya shouts that Makun saw everything. He witnessed everything. Lucia quietly replies that if it's her master, she doesn't object. Aaron exclaims in despair that he doesn't want this. They should have kissed first, and then he should have taken her. Naomi Masatsugu anxiously tells him that everything is bad. The girls have fallen into some kind of mental darkness. Eustacia asks if he is sure about this. He carefully monitors the squid's behavior and shouts that there will be another attack, telling it to be careful, after which he rushes to run away. Eustace remains in place, warily wondering what move the monster will make. It spits a powerful jet of ink in her direction, Naomi Masatsugu pulls the girls away from the monster, and Eustace, completely covered in ink, cries out indignantly, "How could he abandon her alone?" Naomi replies with irritation, "Why did I warn her in advance? Didn't everything end well?" Eustacia cleans up. Aaron goes to the locker room, and Lucia rests in his arms. Naomi Masatsugu calmly remarks that squid ink has wonderful properties. It will restore skin and hair. Eustace thinks about it and agrees, but he adds that she will still have to wash off the dirt because she smells fishy, and it is unbearable. In response, she breaks down and shouts that he should spend the night in prison to think about himself. He turns to Shia, advising her not to pay attention to such words, and asks why she kept such a monster in the hot springs in the first place. Shikaya indignantly replies that she wouldn't even think of such a thing. No one kept a monster there. He asks who brought him here then, and Shikaya adds that there was definitely nothing here yesterday. Eustacia blames him for his own carelessness. If a monster has entered the shelter, it means he is incapable of protecting the place. Naomi tells Masatsugu sternly that he was the one who defeated him, and he doesn't care what she thinks. For him, something else is more important. There is something rotten and suspicious about all this. The king squid ends up being served as dinner for the orphans. Lucia happily tells the host that the meal was incredible, as always, and is surprised that the ink turned out to be so delicious. Considering the amount of food they received, this attack turned out to be a real blessing. Eustacia Ramal finally addresses Naomi Masatsugu. Naomi Masatsugu calmly says he's going to do it. Eustacia Ramal exclaims that it should be obvious even to him that he can't sleep with girls. He explains with a smile that girls cry at night and talk a lot in their sleep. Eustacia is indignant that it is not proper for an unmarried girl to sleep with a man. Naomi smiles quietly, admitting that at least in this she is right. She hugs the girls and firmly declares that from now on, she will sleep with them. She takes Lucia and Aaron, while Shakia stays behind and tells Maku that she will sleep with him that night. Naomi agrees but specifies that he will lie on the bed and she can only stay by the door. She asks to at least sleep on the floor in the room. Anxious, Lucia asks if they will interfere. Eustace replies that she can be relied on. Even by her appearance it is clear. She is trained to sleep under any circumstances. She sits down in the middle and beckons them closer. She takes off her glasses and gently says that everyone is too tired today. She blows out the candle and mentally decides, as long as she is around, she will be able to prevent any crime before it happens. But suddenly he wakes up from quiet crying. Turning around, he sees Lucia in tears. She hugs the girl gently, reassuring her. But she still cries, calling for her mom and dad. Eustacia looks at Aaron. She says something inaudible, and Eustace holds out her hand, asking if everything is okay. But suddenly he shouts that she shouldn't touch him and releases a wave of water magic at her. At night, Naomi listens to Eustacia's story and asks what happened next. She guiltily admits that she acted selfishly, not understanding all the circumstances. Lucia says through tears that she felt bad. Aaron smiles awkwardly and adds that it was dangerous, because she almost hit her with her wind magic at close range. Naomi ironically asks Eustacia if her apology doesn't mean she should now at least bow in dogaji right in front of him. She does indeed bow her head to the floor, asking if that's what he wants. He asks her to stop. She looks up and reminds him that he said it himself. Naomi sighs, says she's tired, and orders everyone to get to bed quickly. They have work to do tomorrow morning. As a result, there are 4 girls in bed with him at once. He asks with displeasure why there are 2 extra girls here now. Eustacia seriously replies that, of course, she is protecting Aaron and Lucia. She adjusts her glasses. Naomi reminds Shay that he ordered her to sleep in the hallway, but she asks if it's unfair if everyone else is already here. He coldly tells her that she doesn't have to sleep with him, so she should go to her room. Eustace is convinced that if he says something like that, it means he really is controlling her. Shiklia casually says that everything is fine and confesses that she wants to make love to Naomi. Eustace calmly replies that she understands. She didn't know this before, but now she's heard that men and women have different ways of being together. Naomi blurts out, wondering how she's suddenly become so frank. He sighs, yawns, and tells everyone to do whatever they want. It's late. He suggests they just go to sleep. Everyone falls asleep. Only Lucia remains awake. Naomi turns to her and asks her angrily why she is still awake. Aaron is sound asleep next to her. The girl smiles broadly and says she feels too happy to fall asleep. Naomi asks, displeased, if she's really happy when it's so cramped. He's clearly not thrilled, while Lucia is beaming with joy. She admits that when she sleeps next to Eustacia, it feels like she's with her mom and dad again. She apologizes to Naomi, saying that he must be upset that she perceives him this way. He calmly replies that no, let her do as she wants. But whoever she thinks he can't be her father, and he can't turn back time. Lucia agrees, recognizing the truth of his words. Then Masatsugu says that at least he can take care of her. Lucia smiles broadly and says that she is truly very lucky. She remembers how scary it was to lose her parents and become a servant. But that is exactly why she was able to meet him. She asks if that will be enough to balance the weight of past tragedies. He coldly replies that it is not, because no words or actions can compensate for the horror they have experienced. But Lucia says with a trembling smile that even so, meeting him was proof that there is still hope in the world. And as long as it is alive in her heart, nothing can destroy it. Masatsugu looks at this girl in surprise, then whispers that she looks like the sun. Her eyes widen. She doesn't understand why he said that, but her heart trembles at the words. He immediately frowns and reminds her that he told everyone to go to sleep because they have hard work tomorrow. Lucia obediently goes to bed and wishes him good night. He closes his eyes, but suddenly hears Eustacia calling his name. He replies angrily that she is also awake. She stands up and says in a trembling voice that even after seeing the beauty she can't allow herself to trust. Tears are choking her, she can't hold back. Sobbing so hard that snot runs down her cheeks, she bursts into a scream that it's not about believing in him. Then she falls abruptly onto the bed, mumbles, "Enough," and turns away. Masatsugu is left completely bewildered. He thinks he would even be wary if someone like her were actually able to trust a man like him even a little. Deep down, he admits that he was appointed director not because of his abilities, but because of orders. And if it weren't for this role, he wouldn't have paid attention to them. It probably never should have happened. In the morning, he asks where Eustacia Raimel has gone. Lucia explains that she was summoned to headquarters, so she left at dawn. Masatsugu sighs in relief. There's finally silence, but he immediately wonders what to do with the mountains of junk lying around. Lucia suggests making ginger stew with him. Masatsugu says it's a good idea for dinner. Aaron cheerfully adds that he wants to try it too, and happily welcomes Eustacia back. But she enters sullenly. Shikoya asks what happened. Eustacia silently approaches and places a document in front of them. It contains an official notice of Masatsugu's arrest on suspicion of organizing a coup d'etat. Masatsugu angrily whispers that he knew that Eustacia was a fool, but this is too much. She understands perfectly well that he does not plan to destroy the monarchy. But Raimo declares that he has gone too far and wants to return to the self who cried last night. The gavel clangs, forcing everyone to silence. The hearing begins. The judge orders Inspector Eustacia to announce the charges. She stands up and sternly declares, "The crime is organizing a coup. The case was opened after a third party complained. Someone is outraged that the Prime Minister did not report this. The judge says that they need to hear from many witnesses to establish guilt." Masatsugu smiles bitterly. This sounds like the Middle Ages. He understands that they won't look for evidence. Everything will be decided by testimony and forced confessions. He remembers hearing this at a lecture once, but he didn't think he would experience it himself. The judge demands to see the defendant's lawyer. Masatsugu looks around in disbelief and sees the girls leaving the shelter. Lucia introduces herself and says that she was supposed to learn a new dish from him, so she will prove his innocence and will definitely master this recipe. Aaron laughs heartily, saying that he never wanted to overthrow the country. It would never have crossed his mind. Shikuya also comes out and introduces herself as Maku's younger sister and lover. She declares that she is ready to fight for him for the sake of their life together. Masatsugu just sighs wearily. He could have guessed. Eustacia calls a witness. A girl in a fur cape enters the hall. Masatsugu grimaces. It's the same goddess of infection. She says it's mean because she found time to have fun with Sylphus just yesterday. He reflects. At first glance she seems like a cold lady, but her true essence is different. She is a dangerous woman who knows how to find weaknesses and ruthlessly exploit them. Eustacia demands that the witness tell about the defendant's daily affairs. She responds mockingly. That's why she hates serious people, because they always have their own tricks. Eustacia is outraged by her behavior. The witness begins. Naomi Masatsugu is an amazing man. During the recent Goblin invasion, he himself challenged the Goblin King to battle and won brilliantly. She solemnly says that he is the savior of their country, even the whole world. But for some reason he is modest and prefers to keep it a secret. The judge is amazed. She adds that when he speaks to her so sharply, she wants to listen to him forever. He's rude, but that's exactly what she likes. And as always, true brilliance is impossible for ordinary people to understand. Their eyes are too blind to see the depth. The judge sternly declares that she has strayed from the topic, orders her to stop joking immediately, otherwise he will order her arrest for contempt of court. She quickly comes to her senses and moves on to Naomi's daily life, saying that he is extremely popular with women, with different beauties approaching him every day. Naomi coldly remarks that no one approaches him. Suddenly, Lucia stands up and loudly shouts denial, believing that the mentor is lying. Naomi, with an irritated look, asks where her promise to protect him is. She awkwardly apologizes. He insists that if she told a lie, then she should clearly explain what it is. The girl turns pale and whispers that she cannot say this in front of everyone. Naomi sharply replies that there's no point unless she tells the truth publicly. He orders her to speak out right here and now. Lucia becomes even more embarrassed, her cheeks burning, her voice trembling as she says her name and confesses her love. The judge forces her to finish her sentence and orders her to speak clearly. She screams in panic that she has been in love since the moment their horses first met. A wave of whispers rises in the hall. In desperation, she exclaims that she is ready to make him soup for breakfast every day. Naomi looks at her with deep disappointment. He thinks that she really did bother him with her cooking. Perhaps she imagined herself to be a close woman, but in the end she's just a child, so he feels only a little sympathy. But even now, as she thinks about the breakfast menu in such a critical situation, he admits that Lucia is an extremely responsible girl. Estacia Rimal exclaims that this is proof of Naomi's shamelessness, who does not hesitate to disgrace herself and play dirty games in front of the public. This is exactly what shows his inhuman nature. The witnesses raise a clamor, agreeing with her, shouting to protect Lucia. "The granddaughter for everyone!" The judge thunders, demanding silence. The first witness indignantly says that Naomi is not capable of carrying this burden, and if he continues to deal with such a stubborn inspector, he will simply suffocate and die. Eustace explodes even more with anger. The judge orders the next witness to be called. Eustacia awkwardly apologizes, admitting that she has committed an indecency and disgraced herself by allowing chaos to be created in court. The first witness intervenes again and enthusiastically suggests to Naomi that they run away together and embark on a dangerous journey. Eustace yells at her to get out immediately. The second witness, bowing theatrically, extends his hand to Lucia, calls her a delicate flower, and immediately turns to Aaron, promising to take her from this boring place and take her to the heavenly world. Aaron shouts in disgust that he won't go anywhere with him. The witness replies that he heard from the inspector about her plight, and that is why he wants to save the unique flower. Aaron calls his words offensive. Eustacia explains that she has summoned someone who has the trust of the king and the respect of both warriors and people, the renowned swordsman and knight commander Eric. He confirms, but adds that he is most proud of the title of Aaron Chan's fan club president. Eustace explodes and demands to renounce this shameful title immediately. He laughs, saying it's a joke, but the judge orders him to concentrate and testify about Naomi. The witness thoughtfully replies that he did indeed see something. He tells how Naomi dealt with a dozen hooligans and threw them into the alley. Eustacia asks if this is not proof of his cruelty. He denies it, saying that it was self-defense, and as a knight he would even like to meet him in a duel. Eustacia allows him to simply challenge him to a duel if he so desires. He happily agrees and offers to fight for the honor of accompanying Aaron. Naomi calmly says that she personally does not mind, but now it is time to end the trial. But the witness assures him that this was the reason he came. Aaron grimaces and says that such an explanation is disgusting. Naomi asks why, with so many options, he would cling to a girl who scolds him like an evil spirit. The witness replies that that's exactly what he likes. He says that her sincerity, indifference to status, and frank words are proof of purity. In addition, she is elegant, has beautiful eyes, and a charming expression, so it is not surprising to confuse her with a goddess. Shakuya indignantly shouts denial, declaring that she is the true goddess here. The witness seriously replies that every woman has a divine essence hidden within her, and if Shakuya works on herself, she too may one day become worthy of this title. Shakaya screams that she is real, asking him in despair, because when she is caused suffering, the feeling tears the soul even more. The witness says with cold politeness that he has nothing more to add about the accused, and says goodbye because he has to go to fencing lessons. Naomi Masatsugu turns to Eustacia and asks if she should pay her witnesses in advance, as that is how she wants to prove his guilt. She looks down at him and asks when exactly she said she wanted to prove him guilty. She explains that she only wants to get to the truth, but personally she thinks he is a spineless and troubled man who could very well become a criminal. Naomi asks if she wants to start a fight. Eustacia firmly states that they will not be able to ensure the fairness of the trial if they start manipulating the testimony, because witnesses must remain neutral. Otherwise it will give rise to false accusations. Naomi sighs with a slight smile, which only irritates her more. She angrily asks if he was just mocking her, and he replies that he was just seeing how stubborn and naive a fool she is. She demands that he take back his words immediately. Meanwhile, the third witness is screaming indignant about how much longer she will have to wait, because she has been through real hell because of this man. Eustacia Rimal announces that the third witness is the self-proclaimed best maid in the world, but she angrily denies that her title is self-proclaimed at all. At that moment, someone shouts for this absurd spectacle to stop, and all eyes turn to him. The woman with the horn on her forehead coldly says that we just need to execute this disgusting bastard as soon as possible. She appeals to the chief judge and demands that he be immediately declared guilty. The judge politely addresses her as Her Highness Prime Minister Mortissimo. Naomi Masatsugu is stunned to think that Mortissimo is a woman, having previously been certain that he was a man. The judge notes that the trial is still ongoing and there is no evidence, so it is impossible to simply announce the verdict. Mortissimo asks if they really need evidence. Naomi realizes that she is not even looking at the defendants. The judge insists that without evidence, it is impossible to charge him. At the same time, according to Her Highness, the suspicion of preparing a coup d'etat has no evidence. The judge asks if he understood correctly, and Mortissimo explains that she simply ordered her entourage to arrest this man and try to have him executed. She adds that she chose the most serious crime that came to mind just as an answer, and the judge asks if she admits that Naomi is not suspected of rebellion at all. Mortissimo calmly confirms that this case has nothing to do with that, and of course she has no evidence. Eustacia asks in astonishment if this is really true, because then there is no reason to blame this man. She herself is shocked by what she hears. Shikaya pompously shouts that all this was possible thanks to her divine protection. Aaron exclaims that their team is great lawyers, and Lucia beams with joy. Naomi calmly points out that this is not at all due to their work in court. Mortissimo asks with cold deliberation when this man's execution will take place. Eustacia Rimal strongly objects, saying that they cannot punish an innocent person, as that would be a complete disregard for the law. Mortissimo contemptuously calls them worms and mocks them. She says he has exceeded all her expectations, and it seems that in 10,000 years he has finally developed some sense of ethics. Naomi replies that she should keep her delusions to herself, because before staging this farce, she should apologize for dragging an innocent person into court. Mortissimo mockingly asks if he really wants her to apologize to him, and contemptuously calls him a parasite. Aaron angrily shouts at her to stop being rude because you can't treat people like that, no matter who she thinks she is. Shikaya picks up on that, and would demand that she not be treated like an animal. Lucia angrily tells her to shut up. Naomi watches and wonders why Mortissimo doesn't look them in the eye. He concludes that this woman doesn't feel hatred. Lucia asks if it's offensive to call them parasites. Naomi replies that she really only sees insects in them. The girls are indignant, saying that they are the same thing, but Naomi explains that the difference is significant. He is convinced that Mortissimo does not feel contempt or hostility towards them. She simply sees them as small, insect-like creatures who are ignored. Emotions like hatred are only inherent to those who are recognized as equals, while she sees them only as helpless insects moving underfoot. Naomi directly asks who she really is. Mortissimo turns his head to him and coldly says that he didn't ask for her name. Naomi firmly replies that she knows perfectly well what it's really about. Eustacia tenses and asks what exactly he's talking about. Mortissimo is surprised that among the insects there was someone who was able to reveal her true nature. In her eyes, he is not an animal, but a person who is able to see more. She approaches and, peering intently, asks his name. She wants to know who this brazen man is who dares to challenge her secret. Naomi Masatsugu says her name and adds that she should remember those she tried to execute. Mortissimo laughs and says she forgives him. She comes closer, smiling as if she has encountered something unexpectedly pleasant. Her words are full of dangerous play and hidden delight. She says his words are too weak to describe her. People call her the god of death. The court and the courtroom erupt in panic and the judge begs her not to joke. Naomi suggests to Masatsugu that they leave the question of what is she for later. Mortissimo admits that he's right, although she's annoyed by his flippant tone. She laughs softly, calling him a sweet person. He recognized her true nature and showed great courage. That is why she is so sorry, because the king ordered her to take his life. With these words, she takes out her weapon. Mortissimo says it's been a while since she's met a worthy opponent who would be fun to play with, but orders are orders. She has to kill him. Naomi sharply asks Masatsugu if she really serves that stupid King Valsam. He doesn't understand who he is to her. Mortissimo apologizes because there is no more time. She swings her sword, and black darkness covers the entire courtroom. Masatsugu says that above all, he keeps his promise to protect the orphans. As long as he can do that, nothing else matters. The witnesses begin to fall asleep. Mortissimo says goodbye and whispers that he will love his imprisoned soul forever, even if he becomes her prisoner. The girls cough and fall asleep too. Shikaya complains that she can't summon the power of a goddess and falls asleep too. Naomi Masatsugu destroys the dark magic with a single move. Mortissimo is amazed that he dispelled her deadly wind. She realizes with horror that this power may be a primordial skill. She had no idea that a person could awaken it. Masatsugu asks about the original skill. She warns that he doesn't even know how to use it. Apparently, it's his connection to the world. Mortissimo says she now understands that the source of his strength is his desire to protect these orphans. She explains that basic skills are the embodiment of fundamental concepts, and these children have become the most important to him. She attacks again, but Naomi Masatsugu blocks the blow, preventing the girls from losing their power. He says that such a weak attack has no effect on him. She smiles and admits that she is now convinced that he will not lose this battle, but he will not win it either. So she decides to destroy the very source of his power. She says that his talent is given from birth, but that's exactly why he doesn't know how to run it. She understood why the king had ordered her to deal with the asylum. It would also help in the king's revival. Masatsugu asks in shock what she means. But Mortissimo just silently disappears through the window, rises into the sky, and disappears from sight. At the shelter, the animals are trying to train harder. Masatsugu watches carefully and asks if this is what they should be doing. Lucia feels blissful when Naomi Masatsugu wipes her ears with a towel. She says it heals her. He wonders if she's really still sick, since she seems perfectly healthy. She blushes and screams that she's not lying. It's just that his touch feels incredible. Masatsugu thinks he can actually see her becoming more energetic from his caresses. It's also a kind of therapy, and Lucia moans with pleasure. Aaron overhears this and taunts Lucia that she is using Naomi Masatsugu for her own gain again. She asks if he does the same. Aaron touches her ears and says that he really hasn't recovered from last week himself. It's the mentor's duty to take care of the orphan's health, so maybe he could stroke her ears too. Shikaya shouts indignantly that this is unfair and demands to join in as well. She lashes out at poor Aaron, declaring that she'd rather be hugged than petted. Masatsugu sighs, calling them both annoying. He sharply tells them that they are perfectly healthy, and reminds them how they almost single-handedly ate all the choice meat that Eustacia Rimal sent as an apology. Aaron brushes it off, saying it was to restore strength, and he himself fried it so skillfully that it was impossible to resist. Shikaya admits that she couldn't resist, as the grated daikon radish and fish sauce made the dish surprisingly delicious. She even starts to drool at the memories. Masatsugu says he's glad she liked it, so next time he'll cook it and serve it to Shaka herself. She screams that then she definitely won't feel anything. The guy adds, a little late, but he wants to clarify. Can an elf and a self-proclaimed goddess eat meat? She angrily shouts that she's a real goddess. Masatsugu is skeptical and asks if this is a violation of racial laws. Aaron doesn't understand what he's getting at. She explains that the meat is a blessing from the mountains, and refusing to accept it would bring a curse. Shikaya assures her that as a water spirit she is free from such rules, for water must always be free. Masatsugu admits that Aaron's logic is understandable, but it doesn't make much sense. Shikaya complains that when she invited the other goddesses to a barbecue, the gods of fire, thunder, and wind only scowled and refused. She almost cries, saying it felt like a mockery. Masatsugu advises her to be grateful that those spirits let her go so easily. He gets up and says that Lucia's treatment should be over by now. She sits contentedly and says that she really enjoyed it. Masatsugu says that they have to prepare another dish today. The girls wonder what they will prepare this time. At that moment, someone comes in and asks if Masatsugu is here. The boy says with disappointment that she showed up on time. A woman rushes in and asks everyone to listen. Masatsugu remarks that she is late, and the meat she sent has already been eaten. The girls look away. He points to Shikaya, adding that he could cook that abomination for her. Eustacia Rimal exclaims that she doesn't care because she has found people who are willing to take the children. Everyone looks at her in shock. Silence falls. Masatsugu squeezes his right hand, asking what they're up to anyway. The girls hide, and he says he must leave the shelter immediately and meet his adoptive parents. Lucia shouts through tears that she will never leave, because she always wants to please her master. Aaron, in despair, also exclaims that no one will listen to her and calls Masatsugu a fool. She scolds him for having a bird's brain and asks who will take care of him when she is gone. The girls attack him with their abilities simultaneously. Masatsugu realizes that Lucia is tracking him by scent, while Aaron is controlling the water with wind magic. They work in perfect harmony. Now they have taken the boy's left hand as well. Eustacia Rimal asks why they didn't just pour water on him. Masatsugu cries out, "Can't she see that this would be better than being raised by him?" The girls shout in unison that it won't. He asks Eustacia if the foster mother she found is a good one. She confirms that yes, she is a local celebrity, does charity work, and she met her herself. The woman is truly good. But if everyone is so against it, Ustasha agrees to go back to the beginning and look for another family. She admits that she didn't expect the children to be so attached to him, and apologizes for the conversation. She says that she probably should have left things as they are. Masatsugu asks her not to be stupid. He firmly states that it is his position as director that is the problem. It is absurd to think that a child abandoned by his own parents can raise other orphans. It's not that he cares too much about these troublemakers. He doesn't really care, but that's why. He believes he has no right to raise anyone. They need a real education and a home where they will be properly cared for. They deserve sincere love and a normal life, unlike him. First of all, this job is the least suitable for him. He became director only by order, and if someone else could be found, he would gladly give up this role. He says there's no problem, if they trust him. Then they're probably right. Ustasha Ramal asks if he's really happy with this, but he coldly replies that she thinks he wants to keep playing family. Standing up, he abruptly adds that he doesn't want to do this and is tired. The sun has already set, so it's time for the children to leave the sandbox and go home. Ustasha asks how he will force them, to which Naomi Masatsugu defiantly replies to just watch silently. He rushes forward, surprising everyone with his unexpected directness. The girls scream warning that the master is attacking, and in an instant they fire a volley at him. He desperately dodges every blow, but the water hits him right in the eyes, burning him with pain. The girls ask excitedly if he's okay. Masatsugu thinks it hurts, but it's just water. If he ignores the pain and moves forward, he will win. All he has to do is forcefully take them to their new family. Lucia runs up and worries if he is injured. Aaron is surprised since he promised to leave. Shay teases him about whether he's become a masochist if he takes punches in the face, and asks if he should get another one. He stops and says that there is no point in catching them, and asks them to listen carefully. The shelter is closing down today, and tomorrow they will go to a new foster family. Lucia tearfully asks if he really hates her. He replies that it doesn't matter whether it's sympathy or hatred, but she has to leave for her own good. She stubbornly says she wants to stay here. Aaron exclaims that she wants to stay too, because it's her home. Shaya adds that if she has a pet, she has to take care of it. Masatsugu says that there's no point in arguing. The shelter will be closed anyway. Lucia touches his clothes with a trembling hand and begs him not to leave her. At that moment, Naomi remembers how his own mother once abandoned him. He feels the pain again from what his parents did to him. Seeing Lucia's tears and the others' excited faces, he suddenly panics and agrees. The girls exclaim happily, wondering if this is really true. Masatsugu quickly explains so as not to confuse anyone. He is not changing the decision, only the conditions. If they don't like their new home, they can come back in a week. He promises to keep the shelter open so they have a chance to return. He apologizes to Ustasha and asks her to inform her adoptive parents. She agrees and says that it is also her duty. She will do everything to respect their wishes. Masatsugu turns to the girls. Lucia wipes away her tears and says she understands, so she will return home in a week. Aaron adds that she was homeless for a year, so 1 week is nothing to her. Shay jokes that she will try to survive in a long-distance relationship. They walk away happily, and he waves after them emotionlessly, thinking they're finally gone. There's silence. He figures it's only been a week. He starts sweeping the house and realizes that he is well aware of his own words. He yawns and grumbles about the leaves everywhere and how hard it is to take care of this place by himself. He remembers the food, quickly pulls out the pot and sees that the dish is almost overcooked. He thinks that without Lucia, cleaning and cooking are becoming unbearable, and he'll have to prepare the font himself every day. He understands that even Shia's absence is annoying, and weeds in the garden are the last thing he wants. At least now the food costs are much lower because there are no those always hungry girls around. And most importantly, finally, peace and quiet. Yet he remembers how they sat with him at the table, smiling sincerely and savoring his food. Now he sits alone, slowly finishing his lunch, and admits that perhaps it's because he no longer needs to invent healthy meals for the children. But inside he feels a strange emptiness. A week passed before the stern Ustasha Rimal appeared and announced that all the girls had decided to stay in foster homes. She added that it was not necessary to announce this, but asked him to stay away from them. This is a very sensitive period for them, so if he wants to convey something important, he'd better trust her to deliver the message. After a long pause, Naomi Masatsugu nodded and quietly said that he understood everything. Ustasha only apologized, turned sharply, and left. Naomi sat down on the cold tiles by the front door, forced a smile, and said with a bitter note that he understood everything perfectly. He admits that this shelter is terrible. An old dilapidated building, meager food, the only comfort here is a font. But what's worse? The worst thing is that the director of this place is someone like him. Taking off his robe, he mentally admits that it would have ended like this anyway. Children should grow up with those who are able to give them true love and care. He enters the house and closes the door behind him. Black clouds gather in the sky, reflecting the darkness that has gripped Naomi Masatsuga's heart.